Hello, my name is Salim Al-Bassoum. Welcome to this video. Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can scrape anything completely for free using DeepSeek, Grok, and Crawl for AI. And after talking to dozens of AI developers and businesses, I can confidently say that web scraping is one of the most in-demand skills that companies are hiring for. So you definitely don't want to miss out on everything that we're talking about in today's video. So to help you guys master web scraping, we're going to go off and build an AI web scraper step by step together to go off and scrape a website just like this, to go off and capture leads, save them to a file so that we can eventually follow up with these potential opportunities at a later date. And because you guys are awesome, I'm going to be giving away all the source code in this video completely for free. Link down in the description below. But hey, enough talking, let's go ahead and dive in to start off web scraping. Oh, and real quick, if you're looking for support on your AI projects and to meet like-minded AI developers, you'll definitely want to check out the free AI developer school I've created for you guys. We have over 4,000 members, weekly free coaching calls, and we'd love for you to be a part of the community. But enough of that, let's go ahead and hop back to the video. All right guys, so let's quickly cover the 3 tools we need to go off and build an AI web scraper. And this is just to help us set up a good foundation before we hop over to code in the next section where you get to see all of this in action. So let's hop into tool number 1, which is Crawl for AI. This is an open source library that makes it super easy for us to go off and scrape websites. And it's awesome because not only can it scrape the website, but it's set up in a way to where it actually can take that content that it scraped and pass it over to an LLM to where it can go off and do anything. So in our case, you're going to see how we're going to scrape a website and actually pull out leads from the website. Very excited to show you guys this in action. And they have a ton of examples that make it super easy to understand their tool. But don't worry, I'm going to break it down, all the important parts that you need to know over in the code section in just a minute. Next, when it comes to tool number 2, it's going to be DeepSeek. Now, DeepSeek has taken over the internet recently, so I'm super excited to show you DeepSeek specifically, the reasoning model, DeepSeek R1, in action. A few things that are super important to note. It's just as smart as OpenAI's O1 model, and it is insanely fast, and it's insanely cheap to run. It's about 20 times cheaper to run. Super excited to show you guys this tool in action in just a second. And then finally, we now have our third tool, which is going to be Grok. So what Grok does is they have a ton of AI chips that are specialized in running AI models. So think of your Llama 3, think of DeepSeek. So now that we have Grok, they also have an amazing free tier, which is going to allow us to not only just run DeepSeek, which is a huge model, but we can actually run it for free and super fast. As you can see in this example, I was like, hey, please explain DeepSeek R1 to me like I'm 5. And tell me why, everyone's going crazy about it. It's super cool because you can see in action. This is one of the specialties of DeepSeek R1. It has this thinking thought process and almost like a human-like fashion of like, oh, by the way, I need to do this. Oh, I also need to include this. So it not only thinks through its answer, it then gives you the answer. So you can see, Grok run to this and it runs it insanely fast. You can see we were doing like 275 tokens per second. And this took under 2 seconds to generate all of this information. So Grok is going to be our hero here when it comes to running DeepSeek completely for free. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually hop over to a quick code overview of exactly what we're building. And we're going to go ahead and start coding out the entire project together step by step. All right, let's go ahead and hop to it. All right, guys, so it's about time to hop into the code, but I just wanted to give you an example scenario so this would all make sense before we just start coding it up. So in this case, we are going to pretend that we were just hired by this wedding photographer. He just moved into town, and what he's trying to do is get more clients for his business because he just wants to, grow his business. How does he want to do this? Well, he wants to go off and just contact more wedding venues to say, hey, I offer these services and I would be happy to help. So what he needs from us is to go off and grab wedding venue information from common wedding venue websites. So in our case, what that means is we're going to say, yes, I will happily go off and build you a scraper for a price, obviously, but here's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go off to whatever area they moved into, and we're going to go over to a common wedding venue site. And what we're going to do is build a web scraper that is going to scrape all the different wedding leads inside of this area. And we're just going to continually go through page after page after page, scraping all this information. And we're going to continue scraping until there's no more wedding venues found. And we have an awesome Excel sheet ready that we can go ahead and send over to them. And basically our end result is to go off and generate something that looks just like this so that the photographer knows the name of the venue, where it's at, how much it costs. And we're also going to use a little bit of AI in here to go off and generate a 1-sentence description of the venue so that when he's calling the venue, he knows a little bit exactly about what they do, the space. So when he's calling, he can have an intelligent conversation. So that's exactly what we're going to be building in the code. We're going to scrape, we're going to save everything to an SUV, and eventually we're going to upload it to a Google Sheet so that we can hand it off to our customer and get paid. So that's exactly what we're about to do. So let's go ahead now and hop over to the code. All right, guys, so now it's time for us to actually start getting our hands dirty and start coding out our AI web scraper using our 3 core tools, which were DeepSeek, Grok, and Crawl for AI. That's the core tools we're going to be using here in this project. And I've tried to set up this project to be as simple as possible for you guys to just copy and paste, and it will just run out of the box. And I've also tried to set it up in a way to where you can easily just tweak a few configuration settings and then instantly go off and scrape any other website. So I'm excited for you guys to see how easy this is to actually run. And before we dive into code though, I just wanted to show you how you can set this up on your own so that you can get it running. So first things first, you just need to head down into the install instructions. And all we're trying to do is go off and first create a new environment that's going to set up and have all the dependencies we need to run this project. So we're going to use Conda for that. Once we have Conda installed, we're then going to go ahead and activate our environment. Then we're going to go off and install all the necessary dependencies. In our case, there's really only one major one, which is Crawl for AI. That's going to be how we're going to scrape everything. And then from there, we're just going to go ahead and once we've installed everything, the only other piece of information you need to do is head over to your Grok dashboard and go ahead and add in your API key to the environment file. So that's all you need to set up this project, and then it will actually just go ahead and run out the gate. And it's so simple to run, just python.me. Okay, cool. So now we've overviewed. Let's go ahead and actually start looking at a quick example of what a crawler looks like. And then we're going to expand on that simple example and go ahead and look at a complete example. So let's go ahead and hop over to a quick example real fast. All right, guys, so here's a quick overview of a simple crawler just so you can understand all the core components before we go off and actually start scraping an entire wedding venue. So what are we trying to do? Well, inside of Crawl for AI, there's a few core components that you need to know. First, browser config. Browser config is how we actually set up what browser do we want to pop up. So specifically, a browser config, you get to pick, I want to open up a Chrome browser. I want the size of the browser to be this big, the window. I want set it to be headless to false. So headless false means I actually want to watch what the browser is doing. I kind of like doing that because I like to see what pages we're actually scraping. But if you just want it to run in the background, you just say headless true, and you get to set a bunch of other additional information. So this is pretty much browser config in a nutshell. And then the other thing that we need to do is set up our crawler run config. So as you can see over here, we have browser config and then crawler config. So once you set up the browser, you now get to pick the crawl, which is what do you actually want to happen? So this is where we get to do a ton of, either simple or complex configuration setups. So inside of here, you can actually pick a few of the core things are, as I'm going off and crawling a website, because this is made for LLMs, you get to pick a bunch of things. So I want to extract information using a DeepSeek model, and I want to pull out this information. You'll see this in action in a minute. I just want to, go ahead and plant a few seeds. And then you get all sorts of options when it comes to actually loading the page. For example, if your page is pretty complex and it doesn't actually render information for a second, you can pass in some JavaScript code and say, hey, please don't scrape the website until this JavaScript element loads. Or you can say, I would like to take a screenshot. There's all sorts of awesome things you get to do in here and play with parameters. But I just want to go ahead and show you what's possible. And you'll see in the code in a second, I actually have links to each one of these. So as we're coding, you're going to have a link to come back and view the documentation and go, oh yeah, that is all the different options I get to use. So excited for you guys to see that section. Now, what do we do next? Well, now that we have a browser that's going to pop up and we've specified our run configuration, we actually get to go off and kick off a crawler. So in our case, that means we're going to say, all right, I would like to go off and scrape a website. I want you to open up this browser. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to go off and actually scrape this URL. And as you're scraping that URL, please use this run configuration right here. So, and what this would do is it would actually go off and scrape the entire website. And actually, it would just give you the results of that website in a nice markdown file that you could go ahead and use. LLMs love markdown. So this is a really nice way if you wanted to, save those results and pass it over to another LLM to do something later on. So that is Crawl for AI in a nutshell. Now that you have that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop over to our code where you're going to see how we can actually take this example and expand upon it and go off and scrape an entire wedding venue, get all the information we need, and go ahead and save it off to a really nice Excel sheet and see how we're going to add in DeepSeek R1. So let's go ahead and hop over to our code. All right, guys, so now it's time for the fun part where we're going to go ahead and start looking through the code together line by line so that we can understand exactly how we're going to tie together DeepSeek, Grok, and Crawl for AI to help us go off and scrape leads for all these different wedding venues. All right, let's go ahead and dive in and start using everything we've learned so far in our code, there's only really one main function that we're trying to do, which is go off and crawl all the venues. So under the hood, here's what's going on in this at a high level. And also it's tied over to what our ultimate goal is. So ultimately, we are trying to go off and crawl this entire wedding venue site and grab all the leads for a city. That's all we're trying to do. So what do we want to do? Well, at a high level, and we're going to dive into this part by part, we want to go off and continually scrape each page and keep scraping until we run out of pages to scrape. So right now we're on page 1, and eventually once we go over to page 10, what's going to happen is we're going to go off and go, oops, no more results found. So goal, keep scraping till no more scraping can be done. All right, so that's all we're trying to do. Now, what do we need to dive in and actually set up to make this happen? Well, at a high level, we need to go off and start setting up our crawler to go off and start scrape each one of the pages. So let's walk through everything real quick. So first things first, as you remember in our quick example, we have to set up our browser config. So we're going to say, hey, I would like to go off and set up a browser, like a Chrome browser, to pop up a window and scrape the page. And I want to see what's going on. I want to see all the logs as we're scraping each page. Okay, makes sense. Now we're going to dive into something new that you haven't seen before, but I do want to explain what it means. So we need to set up our LLM strategy. And all this means is how do we want to scrape and use the LLM to transform the scraped information into valuable information? Well, in our case, all we're trying to do is we want to go off and scrape each one of these wedding venues. So in our case, we want to scrape a wedding venue model. We want to get another model and another one and another one and keep scraping each one of these wedding venues until there's nothing else to scrape. So the keyword I was saying there was venue model. So you can actually see we've created a model inside of our code base. So in the models folder, we have a venue file, and all we're trying to do is for each venue, I want the name, location, and other information that I need in order to give it over to the photographer. All right, so, okay, now we've talked about what information we're trying to get, but what the heck does this LLM extraction strategy even mean? So here's how I like to think about it. As we're going off and scraping a website, we're going to get back a ton of raw data, and we need to set up an LLM to say, hey, look at all this data I just gave you and do something with it. In our case, we're going to say, LLM, I want you to extract all the wedding venues and outside of this, raw data, and I want you to get these different pieces of information, the name, location, price, all that raw information. And I want you to generate a 1-sentence description. And what you'll notice is this information directly ties over to our venue model. So it's like a 1-to-1 relationship. We have to give our LLM what it needs to do and the final model that we want to generate. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense on our instructions and our schema. Now we get to pick, well, what LLM model do we actually want to do all this processing for us? And this is where Grok and DeepSeek come in. So in our case, we're going to say, I want to use Grok, and specifically, I want to use the DeepSeek model on Grok to go off and perform these instructions and convert everything over to this nice venue schema. So hopefully that makes sense. And just to give you a quick tip, you actually could change this if you want to do another free model. You could use OLlama if you have a powerful enough computer and run Llama 3.1 on your local computer. Or if you do like some of the more paid models, you could easily change it over to GPT 4.0, 4.0 mini, whatever you want to do, or O3 mini that just came out very recently. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's quick recap. We're going to set up our browser to go scrape everything. As we're scraping, we're going to have our LLM. We're going to tell it exactly what information it needs to scrape and pull out and make all these nice venue objects. Now we get to dive into the fun part where we're actually going to go, okay, cool. I now have all the base set up. Now it's time to go off and start scraping. So let's walk through this. Well, in our case, what we're going to do is create one crawler. So that's going to be, the crawler that's going to go through and actually scrape all the different web pages. And we're going to say, I want you to open up the Chrome browser. So that's just we're just setting things up to go off and scrape. And once we have our crawler created, now we get to dive into this core fetch and process page function. And all it's trying to do is find wedding venues for us and let us know if it didn't find any more results. That's all it's going to do. So let's go ahead and dive in and see how all this ties together. And I've tried to add in as many comments in here as possible so you guys can understand exactly what data is moving around inside of the codes. As you're off on your own, building your own web scraper, you can just copy this code and tweak it hard. So let's look at this line by line. So first, what are we trying to do? Well, we're scraping. Specifically, we're trying to scrape a specific URL. So a URL is nothing more than a base URL and then the page number we want to go off and scrape. So in our case, we actually have a nice config file set up with some of the core pieces of information. So we're just going to say, hey, I want to scrape this base URL. You could tweak it to whatever URL you want to scrape as well. So we're going to scrape the wedding venues and we're going to start page number 1. Then here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to go off and actually check. We're going to scrape the page. It checked to see if there was no results. So let me show you this. So we're going to pass in the crawler and the URL, and we're going to say, hey, please go off crawler and scrape this page and on this URL. And as you're scraping the page, I just want you to don't cache anything. Just go off and scrape this page. And all we're going to do is get back to see if anywhere on the page, the word no result was found. So scrape the page, look at the results. If everything came back successfully, check to see if no result was found. Because if it was, that means we're on like a late page, so page equals 10. So that means we're on a super late page and there's nothing else to scrape. Hopefully that makes sense. So now we're going to go, all right, if we didn't find results, we're going to return true. And that means we can go ahead and cut out of this early. So no results, didn't find anything. Let's return and quit early. This is a nice way to make sure your code's nice and clean. It's just an early return statement. That's what we're doing. Now, if there is information on the page and we didn't get this no result found page, what we can do is go off and actually scrape the page, but we're going to do a little bit more detailed scrape this time. But we're going to start actually trying to pull out all the wedding venues from the page. So here's how this one works. We're going to say, all right, I would like you to crawl the page again, and I would like you this time to, this is the same page, but we're going to scrape things a little bit differently this time. This time, what we're going to do is add in 2 additional pieces of information, the extraction strategy and the CSS selectors. So let me walk you through what's happening. So when it comes to the CSS selector, all this is we're saying, hey, instead of scraping, thousands of lines of HTML code, I actually only want you to process these specific elements on the web page. So in our case, let's go ahead and dive in and see what elements we want to scrape. So let's make this a little bit bigger. So you can see inside of our website, if I go to inspect mode and I click this little cursor, I can hover over some of these elements, and you can eventually see when I hover over this, I can see when I click on it, I can see all of the classes and styles applied to this specific element I want to scrape. Because all I want to do eventually is just, like I said, from the get-go, I want to scrape, well, even more specific, I really just want to scrape this information, and so on and so on. So how do I scrape that? Well, if I look at the code over here, I can see each one of these web pages. If I hover over this right here, it has a class that says info container. So I really just want to scrape all the info containers on this wedding venue site. And that's exactly what we're doing. If you hop over to our CSS selector, I'm saying, hey, please scrape any class that includes the word info container. That's all we had to do to actually get this set up. Now, all we can do is, now that we're saying, tying it back, instead of scraping the whole website, just grab all the info containers. Now, as you're looking at all the info containers, I want you to use that LLM strategy that we set up a little bit ago, which said, hey, I want you to use DeepSeek to go off and scrape all the venue information. So hopefully this is all getting tied together, and you can see how we're, combining some general scraping with AI scraping. Now what we're going to do is go, great, I've scraped the website. I now can start looking at the result in the extracted content. So this will just be a JSON string that will include all the extracted venues. Then what's going to happen is we're going to load that JSON string, and we're eventually going to get extracted data. This extracted data is going to be nothing more than a bunch of these models right here. So it's a list of venues. So pretty cool if you ask me. Now that's literally the entire code loop. Those are all the core components tying everything together. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and run the code so you guys can see exactly what's getting triggered, and I'm going to explain you what's happening along the way so that all the code we just talked about makes sense. So let's go ahead and start running our code, and I'll walk you through everything as it goes. Okay, so what we need to do is go ahead and open up our terminal, and you need to make sure that you are in your Conda environment. So you can see mine says DeepSeek crawler. That's the Conda environment we created earlier. And now what I can do is do Python main.py. And this is going to go ahead and actually start running our code. And when we run it, it's going to go ahead and pop open a browser window because we said headless equals false. And now it's going to start scraping every single one of the venue pages that we have set up inside of our URL that we want to scrape. So I'm going to zoom out so you guys can see exactly what's happening. So as we scrape pages, you're going to see over here, it's going to start going over to page number 2. After it scrapes page number 2, it's going to go to page number 3, and so on and so on. Now, along the way, what's happening over here in our terminal, you can see, because we had verbose equals to true, so you can see we're getting a lot of logs. So you can see, as we're scraping the website, it's making a bunch of calls over to DeepSeek. Specifically, it's trying to go and say, Grok, please run the DeepSeek model on all this data and let me know what wedding venues you find. And along the way, we have a bunch of different logs. So we can see on wedding page 3, I was able to go off and scrape, 10 different leads. So it's going to keep continually doing it. So in this page 3, we got 28 leads. Now we're on page 4. And along the way, you can see what's pretty cool is you can see it's doing exactly what we've set it to do. So it's, processing a wedding venue. So the name of it's Stillwater Pond, Temple, Georgia, probably near Atlanta. you can see the capacity and the description based on, what's over here. And it's going to continually keep scraping until it's done. What's nice though is we're almost at the end. I think there's only 6 pages. And once it's done, you'll be able to see it goes, cool, I'm at the end. There's nothing else for me to scrape. And it's going to give us a nice little final blurb saying, hey, I'm done scraping. And it's going to give us a quick overview and say, hey, I actually used this many tokens to scrape everything you just asked. Also, by the way, I went ahead and saved everything to a CSV file. So we're on the last page now. If I scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can see we're on page 6. There's not another one. So it's about to quit right now and say, I'm done. So we extracted the final ones. Then you can see it closed the browser for us because it's done scraping. It's done crawling. And then it's going to show us this. It's going to say, hey, here's all the tokens I used. All in all, I used 43,000 tokens. So we're under the limit. I think it's like 60,000 tokens per minute inside of Grok. And then you can see per page what we end up scraping. We actually scraped a lot. Now, what we can do next is actually go ahead and look at our completed venue sheet. And you can see we scraped so much information in no time at all. And we could easily change this, just throw in a different URL and boom, we're off scraping another website. So all around, this is everything that we needed to scrape. And this is everything that we need to go ahead and just pass over to Google Sheets. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and show you real fast how to make that nice table over in Google Sheets. Well, all this new and CSV information. And we'll be pretty much done. All right, guys, so I went ahead and hopped over to Google Sheets. And this is where we're going to go ahead and actually import the CSV file that we just created inside of our code. And all we have to do inside of this one is go ahead and actually we're going to click the import button inside of Google Sheets. So we're going to click import. Then it's going to ask us to upload what we're trying to do. So we can just drag and drop our uploaded CSV. It has a ton of information that we've scraped. So we're going to go ahead and import it. Then things are going to be nice and done. And it's going to say, all right, here's everything that we just scraped. And what's nice is now Google Sheets is going to say, I'd like to convert this to a table. So now we have a beautiful table that we can instantly share with our client. They can come in here. It's all nice now. They can start filtering by prices, capacity, ratings, reviews. And you can see it also has that nice AI generated description of, just a brief description of what this wedding venue is about and what it looks like. So all around, this is awesome. Yeah, I hope you guys see how powerful this is. And I'm so excited for you guys to go off and start scraping your own websites for your own clients using this AI web scraper with DeepSeek, Grok, and also Crawl4 AI. Hello, my name is Salim Al-Bassoum. Welcome to this video. So the functionality here is pretty basic. All we need to do is give it a website URL. So maybe something like the medal table from the recent Olympics. So let's paste that right here. We will scrape the site, grab the DOM content, and then we can pass a prompt to our AI that will be able to grab any information from this website that we want. All right, so we have our DOM content here. This is all the content from the site. Now I can paste in a prompt like give me a table that contains all of the countries and their medal count. We can wait a second and we'll get that information. So there we go. We just got a table now that contains a bunch of medal counts from the countries that were on that website. Let's look at a few other examples, then dive into the code and I'll show you exactly how we build something like this. So here's a more e-commerce related example. It's a website called True Classic, which actually has my favorite t-shirts. And I'll show you how we can scrape this now and grab all of the different t-shirts from this site. So I'm just looking at the polo shirts here. I'll paste in this URL, scrape the site, and then we'll give it a prompt and grab that information. So let's parse the content now using this prompt. And here you go. We get a result here with a few different tables containing the different products' names, their price, currency, ratings, etc. Lastly, let's look at a real estate example. You can see here I have a property finder website for properties in Dubai Marina, which is a place I'm going to be moving to shortly. And if we scrape the site and give it a prompt, again, we can get that data. And here you go. We get a bunch of different properties here with all of their relevant information. All right, so now that we've looked at that demo, we're going to start building out the project. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need to install a few different dependencies because we're going to be using things like Streamlit for the front end. We're going to be using Selenium for actually doing the web scraping. And then we're going to be using LangChain for actually calling the AI and having the AI parse through our data. So what we're going to do is set up a virtual environment here. And notice I've just opened up a new window in Visual Studio Code. So let's do that. Let's install our dependencies and then we'll start building this project. So in order to do that, I'm going to say Python 3 -m venv and then env, or I can name this anything I want. In this case, I'm going to name it AI. Now, if you're on Windows, you can simply replace Python 3 with Python, and this should spin up a new virtual environment for you using venv. Okay, so let's hit enter here, and now you can see that we have a new one called AI. Now we need to activate that virtual environment. Now, if you're on Mac or Linux, the command to do that will be source, the name of your virtual environment, then /bin, and then /activate. When you do this, you should see that you get a prefix before your commands line saying the name of the virtual environment. Now, if you're on Windows, I'm going to show two commands on screen right now that will show you how to activate your virtual environment. They'll differ depending if you're using CMD or PowerShell. So just type that command in, activate your virtual environment, and now we're going to install a few different dependencies. Now, all the dependencies that we need I've actually put up on GitHub, so I'm going to link this in the description, but go there and click on requirements.txt. Now, requirements.txt will contain all of the requirements that we need to install. So I'm just going to copy the contents of this file. I'm going to make a new file in my local directory here that contains the same. So I'm going to say requirements.txt here. I'm going to paste all of these requirements inside. So again, go to the GitHub, it'll be linked in the description. Copy the contents of the requirements.txt file, paste them inside of a new file in your local directory, and then we can install them using this file. So now what we're going to do is simply type pip install -r and then requirements.txt. Obviously make sure that when you're running this command, you're in the same directory as this file, and then go ahead and hit enter. Now this will install all the dependencies that we need inside of this virtual environment so that they're contained, we're not installing them system-wide. Now you notice here that we're using Streamlit, LangChain, Selenium, Beautiful Soup, and Python.env, a few other modules as well. And these will allow us to kind of build the entire project out, and I'll explain each library and why we're using it when we get to that stage. It's just easier to install all of them at once. Alright, so all of those dependencies have been installed, so I'm going to close my terminal now, and we're going to move on to the next step. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a Python file called main.py here. Now just to quickly walk you through the steps that we're going to follow through here, the first thing that we're going to do is create a very simple Streamlit user interface. If you're unfamiliar with Streamlit, this is a way to create really simple Python web applications that just takes a few lines of code. So it's probably the easiest way to interact with things like LLMs, which is what we're going to be using here. Once we built the Streamlit UI, the next step is to actually grab data from the website that we want to scrape. So in order to do that, we're going to use a Python module known as Selenium. Selenium allows us to automate a web browser, so we can actually navigate to a web page. We can grab all of the content that's on that page, and then once we have that content, we can do some filtering on it, and we can pass it into an LLM. An LLM being something like ChatGPT, right? Or GPT-4 or Llama 3 or whatever you want to use. And then we can use that LLM to actually parse through the data and give us a meaningful response. So let's start here by building out the Streamlit UI, and we'll kind of build this as we go through the video. So we're going to say import Streamlit as st. Now beneath here, what we're going to do is add a title for our website. So we're going to say st.title, and this is going to be AI web, if we could type this correctly, scraper. And then we're just going to put a kind of URL input box here. So we're going to say URL is equal to st.text input like that. And then we're going to say enter a website URL. Okay, and this is just going to create a very simple kind of text input box for us. Perfect. Now beneath that, we're going to say if st.button, and then this button is going to be scrape site. Then we're going to do something inside of here. So this is as simple as it is to create a Streamlit UI. This makes a title. This adds a text input. And then the button we can put here, and we say if this button is clicked, then we're just going to execute whatever code is inside of this if statement. So for now, actually, if we want to test that, we can just say st.write, and then we can write something like scraping the website, and then we can proceed to scrape the website down below. So in order to run our Streamlit application, the way that we do that is we type Streamlit and then run, and then the name of the Python file that contains our Streamlit app. In this case, it's main.py. Again, notice that I'm running this from the same directory as my Python file. So I do Streamlit run main.py, and now it's going to spin open a web server for us, and you see that we have AI web scraper. We can enter a website URL and then press scrape site. When we do that, it says scraping the website. If we refresh, it'll just go back to that main state. Perfect. Now we can still write code while this is running. It will automatically refresh, but for now I'm just going to close this with Control C, and we're going to go on to actually do the web scraping component of this app. So in order to do the web scraping here, we're going to use Selenium. Now what I'm going to do is make a new file called scrape.py. Now this is where we'll write our scraping code just to separate it from the main file so it's a little bit easier for us to navigate. So what we're going to do is import a few Selenium modules or Selenium, classes that we need to use. And then we're going to write a function that takes a website URL. It just returns all of the content from that website. Now, as I said, we're going to use Selenium to do this. And then I'm going to show you how we can connect this with a service known as Bright Data, which is actually the sponsor of this video. But don't worry, we'll talk about them later on, which will allow us to actually do this at scale and to get past things like captchas, IP bands, and other blocks that you'll commonly encounter. So what I'm going to do here is import selenium.webdriver as WebDriver. And then I'm going to say from selenium.webdriver, and this is .chrome.service, we are going to import service. Okay, now we're going to write a simple function that will allow us to actually grab the content from a website using Selenium. Now again, what Selenium allows us to do is control our web browser. We can actually do things like click buttons and interact with text widgets or, kind of interact with the page as if a human was doing it. But in this case, we're just going to use it to grab the content from a site. So I'm going to make a function called scrape_website. And then inside of here, I'm going to put website. Now what I'm going to do is just do a print statement. I'm going to say launching Chrome browser, just so we know what's going on here. And I'm going to write a few different variables. So the first thing I'm going to do is say Chrome driver path is equal to an empty string. I am then going to specify some options. Now options is going to be WebDriver.Chrome options. We need this when we set up the WebDriver. Even though it's empty, we still need to pass it, and we could specify options here later on. And then I'm going to say driver is equal to WebDriver.Chrome, and we're going to say service is equal to service, and we're going to pass inside of the service our Chrome driver path. We're then going to say options is equal to options. So let's save that, and I'll just make this a bit bigger so we can see. And let's write the rest of the code, and I'll quickly explain what all of this is doing. So we're going to write a try block, and we're going to say driver.get, and we're going to try to get the website. What this does here is use our WebDriver to actually go to the specific website. And then once we're on the site, we can grab the content from it. So we're just going to do a print statement, and we're going to say print page loaded ... so we know that it's loaded. And then we can grab the HTML by simply saying HTML is equal to driver.page_source. Then we can return the HTML, and we can have a finally block here where we say driver.quit. And that's it for this function. Okay, I know I went fast. Don't worry, I'm going to explain what's happening here and what the next step is. So the first thing we need to do is we need to specify where our Chrome driver is. Now this is actually an application that we'll need to download in just 1 second that allows us to control Chrome. So we need to have a Chrome driver, and this application will be different depending on what operating system you're using. We then have options. Now the options are so we can specify how the Chrome web drivers should operate. We don't need to pass any options right now. That's why it's blank. But we could specify that we want to run it in headless mode, or we want to ignore images or something along those lines. Next, what we have is we set up our actual driver. So we say WebDriver.Chrome. In this case, we're going to use Google Chrome, but we could be using Firefox, Safari. Doesn't really matter. We can automate pretty much any browser that we want. We then specify the service that we're using, and that's going to be wherever the Chrome driver application lives. And then we give it the options, and we're good to go. Then we can use the driver, which is effectively automating our browser by using commands like .get. Okay, then we grab the page source, which is our HTML, and we return that. Now lastly, I'm just going to import time, and I'm just going to do a sleep so we can see what's going on here. So I'm going to say time.sleep10. Great. So now that we've done this, the next thing we need to do is grab our Chrome web driver. So to do that, we're going to go to a link that I'll leave in the description. It's this one right here. And you're going to click on Stable. When you do that, it's going to give you all of the download links for various operating systems for appropriate Chrome drivers. And the Chrome driver version needs to match your Google Chrome version. So I recommend just updating your Google Chrome to the most recent version, and then you can just download the most recent version of Chrome driver. Anyways, all the versions are here, and you want to just go with the latest stable version or whatever matches your Google Chrome version. Okay, So in my case, I'm going to download the Chrome driver for Mac ARM64 because I'm using the new M2 or M3 or whatever chips that they have. But if you're running an Intel Mac, it's going to be this one. And then you have Windows, obviously, and Linux. Okay, so go to this download link and it's going to download a zip folder for you. Now, I already have that downloaded, and you'll see that when you download it, it will give you a folder or a zip folder that looks like this. Now, what you want to do is extract that zip folder so you get the actual folder, and then you want to copy the application that's inside of here and put it in the same directory where your code is. So I'm just going to copy the Chrome driver inside of here by simply pasting it in VS Code, and now I have access to it in the same path where my code is. Okay, so again, go to this website, download the appropriate Chrome driver, extract the zip folder, grab the Chrome driver application and maybe name something slightly different depending on your operating system, and then paste it in the directory where your code is. Great. Now that you've done that, you're simply going to write for the Chrome driver path / and then Chrome driver. Now this will be the name of your application. So if you're on Windows, I believe it's a .exe, but just whatever the name of this app is, you want this variable name to match. Okay. Now that we've got that, what we can do is go back to main.py. We can import this function, and then we can call it, and we can test this out. All right, so from main.py here, in order to use this, we're going to say from scrape, import scrape website. Then inside of this function, we're going to call scrape website with the URL. We're going to store that in a result. And we are simply going to go here and print out the result, just so that we can see in our terminal if we're getting any response. Okay, and help me just get out of whatever I have here and clear. Okay, so now we're going to rerun our application. So to do that, we're going to say streamlit run and then main.py. So let's go ahead and do that. And now we can enter a URL to test. So I'm going to test my website. And feel free to do this, by the way, which is just techwithtim.net. I'm going to press scrape site. And we should see that the Chrome driver launches. It shows our website. We're just waiting for 10 seconds here, where you can check out my software development program. Great plug there. Anyways, and then it will quit. It will return the HTML, and we should be able to see that if we go to our terminal. And you can see if we go back to our terminal, we get all of the content from that page. Perfect. So that is exactly how you do the web scraping using Selenium. However, I want to show you that this doesn't always work as expected. So if I actually try to scrape something like Amazon, so I'm going to do amazon.ca, notice what will happen here. So let's go amazon.ca and see that we actually get a captcha. And the reason for this is that when we do web scraping locally on our own computer using something like Chrome driver, it's very easy for the website to detect that we're a bot. There's all kinds of things that it can look for. And you'll notice that when you start doing this more and more, a ton of websites are actually going to block you. Now, they could be blocking you with that captcha, or they could be blocking you things like IP bans, just not showing you the correct content. And it could be a huge nightmare, especially if you want to put this app out into production. Now, that's where the sponsor of this video, Bright Data, comes in. Now, Bright Data provides a ton of different products that really just make web scraping and data collection on the internet significantly easier. Now, we're actually going to use them in this video entirely for free, and you're going to see how we're able to actually scrape sites that would typically block us using this service and this technology. Now, what I'm going to focus on here is something known as their scraping browser. However, they have a ton of other products as well, like residential proxies. They have web unblocker. They have this new search engine API. They've got a ton of stuff coming out, so definitely check them out. And I'll leave a link in the description where you can actually sign up for a new account here and get some free credits so that you can follow along with the rest of this tutorial. Now, keep in mind that you can just keep doing web scraping how we're doing it right now. You don't need to change this. But if you want to get unblocked through these websites that are giving you captchas or causing you issues, or eventually you want to push this into production and do web scraping at scale, you will need to use a service like Bright Data. Anyways, I want to show you exactly what we're going to use here and how it works. So I'm going to go to my user dashboard, which is only available once you make an account. Now I have some credits on here, and what we're going to do is make a new instance of something called their scraping browser. So to do that, I'm going to click on this little icon right here for proxies and scraping infrastructure. But notice I have a ton of other stuff, like a web scraper API. They have web data, like they have data sets that are already made for you. And if you're just doing web scraping at all, they have a bunch of services. Now, what we can do is create a new scraping browser by simply clicking on Add here and then clicking on Scraping Browser. Now, scraping browser includes a captcha solver as well as connects to a proxy network. What that means is that it will automatically give you new IP addresses and cycle through those so that you can simulate as if you were a real user, kind of accessing a website. It also means that if there is a captcha that occurs, it will automatically solve it for you. So you don't need to deal with being blocked by captchas. So what I'm going to do here is just give this a new name. So we'll just call this AI scraper like that. There's a few other options, but we can just click on add. And once we do this, it's going to say, yes, okay, we want to go ahead and create this. And I'll show you how we can connect to this from our code. Now, the main advantage for developers here is that this just works with the code that you already have. So in our case, we're using Selenium, right? So we can just continue using Selenium, but rather than doing the scraping on our own computer, we'll push that out to the cloud and use a remote browser instance, which is what this scraping browser is. So it's rather than running the Google Chrome browser on our own computer, we let Bright Data run it for us where it's connected to all of its tools, and it works exactly the same way. Now this works with Playwright, Puppeteer, Selenium, Scrapey, I believe as well, and in some other languages, so let me show that to you. Okay, so now that this is created, all I have to do is go to Checkout Code and Integration Examples, and if I do that, it's going to show me how to connect to this from our code, and what we'll do is we'll modify our code now to use Bright Data so that we're able to actually scrape at scale and to get past all of those blocks. So you can see that we have a few different options here like Node.js, Python, C#, Java. Obviously, we're using Python, so we'll select that, and then we can choose what library we're using. So in our case, it's Selenium. So what we'll do is just copy the code sample that it has here and kind of retrofit that to our current code. And you can also just test it, by the way, if you want to do that using this. Okay, so let's go back here, and let's just make kind of a new section of our code. Let me zoom out so we can see here. And you'll notice that really all we're doing is rather than kind of connecting to this web driver where we've downloaded ourselves on our own computer, we're connecting to a remote instance, which is defined by this URL right here. So we have this SBR connection. We're connecting remotely to this remote browser instance. And then we can do the exact same thing that we did before. However, there's this code that we can uncomment. And this right here will actually solve captchas for us. So if we think a captcha is going to occur on our page, whether it does or doesn't, we can execute this command on the remote browser instance, and it will automatically solve that captcha for us. So you can see it will tell us what the status of that was, and then continue on with the rest of the code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of copy this that we've got. I'm going to remove the rest of this. I'm going to paste that inside of here. So let's get rid of all this. Let's paste this code. And let's just take these 3 lines and put these at the top of our program. Okay, so let's actually replace these with those because we no longer need them. And now, if we go here, you can see that we have print launching Chrome browser. We have this SBR connection. And then we are connecting as driver. And we're going to this website. So let's change example.com to say website. We can get rid of this first print statement. We can run the captcha solver. We can grab the page source, and then we can return the HTML. This time, rather than what we were doing before, which was, what was it? Just printing it out. Okay, so now again, we have the exact same thing, except we're using Bright Data. Okay, so let's test this out now and just make sure that this works. And again, I want you to kind of focus on the fact that this was literally just a few lines of code change. Now we're just kind of using this rather than setting up our own web driver. And also this is significantly easier than having to download the web driver, set that up, etc. So let me go back to my Streamlit app. Let's make sure that's running, by the way. So let's just quit this and rerun it just so that we refresh our code. And let's try to go to Amazon now. So we're going to go to amazon.ca and let's see the results that we get. All right, so I'm just looking at the console here because the scraping has finished, and you can see that there's actually not a captcha now, even though I know it's a little bit difficult to navigate here. We are actually able to access amazon.ca and grab the content from that site. Now, it's not popping up on our own computer because we're connecting to that remote instance. We could go in and debug that and view that if we want, but the point is we're getting all of this content and we're not being blocked like we were before because now we've connected with Bright Data. So that's great. Let's continue on now with the rest of the tutorial because we're able to actually grab this HTML source. Okay, so now that we have the HTML source, what we want to do is clean this up a little bit and make sure that we're not grabbing things like script tags and style tags and all these other pieces of content that we don't want to pass to the LLM. The idea is we want to take just the textual content, pass that to the LLM and allow it to parse it so we have the fewest tokens possible, and we can reduce the amount of characters or batches that we need to submit to our LLM to get a valid response. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but for now I want to write a few helper functions that will kind of clean this HTML for us. So the first thing I want to do is write an extract body content function. And this is going to take in HTML content, and that's not what I meant to do. Let's go down here. What this is going to do is simply extract the body. So we're going to say soup is equal to beautiful soup, and we're going to actually import beautiful soup now, which is an HTML parser. So in order to import beautiful soup, we are going to say from BS4 import beautiful soup like that. Okay. So now we will import beautiful soup. We are going to pass to this the HTML content, and we're going to specify that we want this to do an HTML.parser. Okay. Next, we're going to say that the body content is equal to soup.body. So we can actually just grab the body tag directly from this because it will parse it for us. And we're going to say if body content exists, and I don't know why that keeps happening, then we are going to return the string of the body content. Otherwise, we are just going to return an empty string so that we don't potentially get any errors. Okay. Next, after this, we're going to clean the body content. So we're going to say define clean body content like that. We're going to take in body content as a parameter, and we're going to clean it. So in order to do that, we are going to say again, soup is equal to beautiful soup. We're going to take the body content and then HTML.parser. So just reparse that again. And we're going to say for script or underscore style in soup. And then we are going to take script and style. Then inside of here, we're going to say script or style dot extract. And what this is effectively going to do is it's going to look inside of our parsed content for any scripts or style, and it's simply going to remove them. So that's all this is doing. It's just getting rid of those tags because we don't care about the styling or all of the scripts, which is just unnecessary characters. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to say cleaned content is equal to soup.get underscore text. And we're going to specify that the separator is equal to the \n character. So let's do that. So \n, sorry, this is the new line character, which just says, okay, get all of the text and then separate it with a new line. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is say cleans underscore content is equal to, and this is going to be \n dot join. And what I'm going to do here is write some fancy code that's going to effectively remove any \n characters that are unnecessary. So a lot of times when you grab the content from the HTML, you're going to get a bunch of empty text strings. I want to remove all of those strings so we don't have them in our text. So in order to do that, I can do the following. I can say line.strip for line in the cleaned content dot split lines if line.strip. Now what this effectively says is if a \n character is not separating anything, so if there's no text between it and the next thing, then we're just going to remove it. So that means get rid of all these kind of random \n characters that aren't actually separating any text and just exist in the, the text that we don't need. So stripping will remove that. It'll also remove any leading or trailing spaces. Great. And then after this, we're going to say return the cleaned content like that. Okay. The last thing that we're going to do is split this content up into batches. So what happens is when we want to use an LLM, we have a specific token limit. Now that token limit is usually about 8,000 characters. That means that if we have a really big web page, it's possible that the LLM can't take the entire web page at once and parse all of it. So what we need to do is actually split our text into a bunch of different batches of whatever the maximum size is. So maybe 7 batches of 8,000 characters or something along those lines, and then feed those characters to the LLM one batch at a time so that it's able to process them. Again, that's because there's a token limit and we're not able to submit every single character if we have too many. So that's what this function is going to do. We're going to say define split DOM content, and we're going to take the DOM content, and we're going to take a max length equal to, I'm going to set this to 6,000, but I believe the max is typically 8. I'm just leaving it at 6 to ensure we're not going to go over. I'm then going to say return DOM underscore content, and this is going to be I to I plus the maximum length, and this is going to be for I in range, and then this is going to be a little bit of an advanced step, but I'll explain this. We're going to say range 0, the length of DOM content, and then take the maximum length. Okay, so the way that this works is I want to create batches of 6,000 characters. So I'm saying, okay, I want to take my DOM content from index I, which will start out at 0, up to I plus whatever the maximum length is. So in this case, it's 6,000. So this would grab the first 6,000 characters for me. Then what this for loop will do is it will step by the max length up to the DOM content. So after I grab the first 6,000 characters, now I will be equal to 6,000 because it will step forward 1. So we'll then start at 6,000 and go up to I plus the next 6,000 characters. And we'll keep doing that until we reach the length of our DOM content. Okay, perfect. So that's it for the scraping. Now we need to connect these functions in our main.py. Okay. So how are we going to do that? Well, first let's import them. So we're going to say from scrape, import scrape website. We're going to import the split DOM content, the clean body content, and the extract body content functions. Now what we're going to do is call those functions and then kind of print out the result in Streamlit so we can see what it looks like. So we're going to say the body content is equal to extract body content, and we're going to take the result. We're then going to say the cleaned content is equal to the clean body content, and we're going to pass in the body content. Then we are going to store this in the session for Streamlit. So we're going to say st.session_state.dom underscore content is equal to the cleaned content. This way we can access it later. Then we're going to say with st.expander. Now this is an expander text box that allows us to expand it to view more content. We're going to say view DOM content. And we're going to write inside of here that content. So we're going to say st.textArea, and we're going to say DOM content. And then this is going to be the cleaned content, and we can give this a height of 300. So sorry, let me clarify this. The expander is kind of like a button that will toggle what we're showing in here. So when we click on it, it will show whatever's inside of here. When we click on it again, it will collapse it. Then the text area is something that we can expand the size of so we can view like a little bit of content or a ton of content. And that's why we give it a starting height. And then we say that this is kind of the title of the text area, and this is the content that we want to display. Okay, so now let's actually view this. So to do that, let's refresh our Streamlit app. Let's make sure it is running, and I believe it is. And now we can view my website again. So let's do techwithtim.net. Let's scrape this. It's going to take a second, and then once we get that content, it will show us that in the expander view. Okay, amazing. So now we have this view DOM content window, and when I do this, you can see we get all of the textual content from the main page of my website. Perfect. So that is that. That's actually a lot of the hard work done. The next step now is to actually take this DOM content and pass this into an LLM that will parse it based on what we ask it to do. So now what we need is we need to actually ask the user for a prompt. So like, hey, what information do you actually want from this site? And then once they give that to us, we can pass that a prompt as well as the DOM content to an LLM and have it extract that data. So we're going to say if DOM underscore content is in the st.session state. So if we've saved that, then what we're able to do is say parse underscore description is equal to st.textArea. And we can say, describe what you want to parse, question mark. Then we can say, if st.button, and this button can be parse content. And we can say, if the parse description, then we can say st.write, and we can write parsing the content. And inside of here, we can parse it. So in order to parse it, we're going to say the DOM chunks are equal to split, and this is going to be DOM content. And then we're going to take the st.session state.dom content and pass that to it. then of course you need to pass this to an LLM, which will be the next step. So we're going to take these as chunks, pass them to an LLM, get some response, and then write that. That's pretty much it. But we need to obviously write the LLM component. But anyways, if we go back here, you can see now that if we refresh and we scrape the site again, so let's go here and scrape it. So techwithtim.net. After we do this, it should pop up a text window asking us to enter a description. Okay, so you can see now that it gives us this text box saying describe what you want to parse, and I got to fix that spelling mistake, and then we can write whatever we want in here and then parse the content. Perfect. So now we're going to move on to the LLM component. So we're going to make a new file here called parse.py. And let's start writing the code that we need. And then we're going to download Ollama, which is what we're going to be using to actually execute the LLM. If you're unfamiliar with Ollama, this is something that allows you to run open source LLMs locally on your own computer. So you don't need to rely on things like API tokens from OpenAI, and you don't need to pay. This is completely free. So what I'm going to do is let's import here. I'm going to say from langchain _ Ollama import Ollama LLM. I'm then going to say from langchain, and this is going to be _core dot prompts imports the chat prompt template. Now Ollama LLM is because we're using Ollama, but if you wanted to, you could use something like OpenAI, you could use Gemini, you can use whatever you want really for the LLM. But LangChain is something that allows us to kind of connect LLMs to our Python code, and that's why we're using it. Now, what we'll do is we'll say model is equal to Ollama LLM, and then we'll say model is equal to Llama 3. Now, I'm going to specify how you know what to put here in just 1 minute, but I want to write all of the code first so that we're not jumping back and forth between too many windows. Okay, so now we have our model. This is only going to work once Ollama is installed, which again, don't worry, I'm going to show you in just a minute. We're going to write a function now that will use this to parse our code. So we're going to say parse with Ollama. We're going to take in our DOM chunks and our parse description. Okay, and then inside of here, we are going to create a kind of, a way of calling the LLM with that code and the description. Now we know when we call an LLM, we need a prompt. Now we will have a prompt that comes here from Streamlit, so it's like, describe what you want to parse, but we need to give it some more details so that it knows what to do with that, as well as the DOM content that we're about to pass it. So what I'm going to do is copy in a template here from my GitHub. So this is the template. Let's just make this a little bit smaller so you can actually read it. And you'll notice that inside of the template, we have two variables, DOM content and parse description. If you're unfamiliar with how templates work, all you can do is write a bunch of normal code in strings, which is what I'm doing. And then you can specify any variables that you want to be injected when you actually execute the prompt. In this case, we want to pass the DOM content and the parse description. Now, I won't read the entire thing to you, but it pretty much says, you're extracting specific information from this content. Here's a description of what the user wants, and then it just gives some more specific instructions to make sure that, we get a decent response from the LLM. You could improve this prompt, you can change it around, but this is one that I found worked fairly well, so that's why I'm copying it in here. Now, if you want to find that prompt yourself, you can go to GitHub, you can go to parse.py, and you can simply copy it directly from here, which is exactly what I just did. Okay, so now we're going to go into the parse of the llama function. So what we're going to do is say prompt is equal to chat prompt template, and this is going to be dot from, not messages, dot from template, and we're going to pass the template that we wrote. We're then going to say the chain is equal to prompt pipe and then model. This is the straight pipe on your keyboard. If you're familiar with it, is on the far right hand side, typically beneath the delete key. I just say that because a lot of people aren't familiar with this character. It's usually with the backslash. Okay, anyways, now we have a chain. This means that we're first going to go to the prompt, and then we will call the model. That's kind of how it works with lang chain. We're then going to create a array here, or a list called parsed results. And what we're going to do is pass all of the different chunks to our LLM and then grab the results and store them in here. So we're going to say for I, comma chunk in enumerate, and we're going to enumerate over the DOM chunk. So we're going to start equals 1, When you say start equals 1, that just means that I will start at 1 rather than 0, so that we don't need to add 1 to it if we're going to be printing out the value. It doesn't actually change the enumeration. It just means that I will start counting at 1 rather than 0. Okay, next we're going to grab a response. So we're going to say response is equal to chain.invoke. Now this is how you call the LLM. And when you call it, you need to pass 2 variables, and they need to match the variables that you specified here. If you change the prompt and add other variables, well, then you need to pass those as well. So we're going to pass the DOM_content, which is equal to the chunk, because we're passing 1 chunk at a time. And then we're going to pass the parse description. Okay, and then parse description like that. Okay, now we have a response. And what I'm going to do is just print out some kind of logging information. So I'm going to say parsed batch, and then notice that I'm using an F string here so that I can embed variables directly inside of curly brackets. And I'm going to say I of, and then len of my DOM chunks. I'm going to put this inside of variable. The reason for this is so I know how many chunks we're parsing, because sometimes this will take a fair amount of time, and I want to have some kind of output so I know that something's going on. Then I'm going to say my parsed results dot append, and I'm going to append the response that I got from the LLM. Lastly, I'm going to return a \n dot join my parsed results, which is going to take all my results and just join them with a new line character. Okay, so that is how this works, right? What we're doing is we're creating a prompt template. We're using that for our model. We are then just taking all of the chunks from our DOM, right? So all of those 6,000 character chunks, and we're going to pass them into the prompt. So we pass them as DOM content, and then our LLM knows what to do because of the instructions that we've given it, as well as that parse description that we provided from the Streamlit UI. We parse 1 chunk at a time. We then take those, append those into the results, and then we join them and return them. That's it. Now, obviously, you can do this with other LLMs, and the faster your computer is, the faster this is going to execute. There's ways to parallelize this, add asynchronous code, and to make this run a lot faster. But for the simplicity of this video, this is what I am going to be doing. Okay, so this is great, but this only works once Ollama is installed. So let me quickly show you how we install Ollama. It's pretty straightforward. You're just going to go Ollama install on Google, and you'll see that you have a download Ollama link. So I'm just going to click on this one right here. And notice that you have 4 options, or 3 options, are Mac, Linux, and Windows. So obviously click the appropriate one and download Ollama. And once Ollama is downloaded, you need to run it. And in order to run it, you're going to open up your terminal or your command prompt. And you're going to type the Ollama command. Now when you type Ollama, you should get something that looks like this. And now what we need to do is pull an Ollama model. So the Ollama model is what we're actually going to be using. We need to download the model locally before we can execute it. So in order to do that, actually, let's go to the Ollama GitHub quickly, and I'll show you a bunch of different options that you have. So if you go to Ollama GitHub, you'll see that if you scroll down here on this page, it shows you all the different models that you can use. Llama 3.1, Mistral, Code Llama, you got a bunch of different options. So you can pick what you want, but notice the size of it, okay? So obviously, the bigger the model you download, the more performant it's going to be, but the harder it's going to be to run. And it will specify down here how many gigabytes of RAM you need in order to run these various different models. For example, if you want to try to run Llama 3.1, this has 405 billion parameters. You're going to need a very intense computer. I don't even think my computer, which is an M2 Max, would be able to run that. So pick an appropriate model based on the specs of your computer, and then you can run it. So for example, let's say you just want to do Llama 3.1. Okay, what we can do is we're going to go here to our terminal, and we're going to type Ollama pull, and then the name of the model, which is Llama 3.1. Now I already have this, so I'm not going to run it, but you would run this code. It would then download the model for you, and then you just need to wait for that to finish, and then you're able to actually use it. Now in order to use the model, you can say Ollama run, and then something like Llama 3. When you do that, it's going to give you a prompt window. You can say something like hello world, and then you can actually use this model. So I have Llama 3, obviously. If you have Llama 3.1, then you would change this to Llama 3.1. And I think I want to exit, so can I do /exit? Yes, and then that will get me out of that. Okay, I know I went fast there, but I'm just trying to quickly show you how to get Ollama on your system. Now that Ollama is on your system, we can start using this code. So let's go back to main.py, and let's import that function. So we're going to say from parse imports, and then this is going to be parse with Olama. And now all we need to do is say result is equal to parse with Olama, and then parse the DOM chunks and the parse description. Now the parse description is right here. Okay, so that's perfect. And then we can just say st.write, and we can write the result to our terminal. That's it. So now let's test this out and see if it works. So we're going to go back here. We'll do techwithtim.net just to check my website. So let's refresh this and just make sure that this is working. So we'll go https://techwithtim.net, and we'll wait for that to scrape. And then we'll just give it a prompt like, can you describe this site or something, and see what it tells us. Okay, great. So we've got the DOM content here. So now I'm going to say, hey, can you put all of the main titles from this page in a table for me, ? I don't know exactly what kind of result we're going to get from that, but let's see what happens if we do this. And you see that it shows us the main titles that I found, which actually are correct. Tutorials, courses, community, gear, shop, donate, software development program, my software development program, and tech with Tim. Boom, it just parsed that content for us. Now we can try with a more complex site. So let's use one of those real estate sites I showed you before. Okay, so here's a property finder site that just has a bunch of different properties from Dubai Marina. This is the same example we looked at the beginning of the video, and this is interesting because I'm actually going to be moving to Dubai shortly, so I might actually want to make a web scraper that can organize a bunch of these properties for me. Anyways, point is, I put that link here. Let's scrape it, and then I'll give this a prompt, and we'll see if it can organize that for us. Okay, so the site is scraped, and if we go here, I'll just say, can you please collect all the relevant information and organize it in a table? And let's see what that gives us. And you'll notice if we go back here, by the way, to the terminal, that it should be showing us the batches. So here it said, parsed batch 1 of 1. And this one, actually, let me just click it again. I don't think that button worked. It should pop up and tell us, parsing batch 1, parsing batch 2, parsing batch 3, as it goes through there. Okay, and there we go. That actually happened quite quickly, and it gives us a table here of this property information. Sweet. So that is pretty much it for this tutorial. I wanted to create a simple AI web scraper for you, and I wanted to leave this so that you could extend it and make it more customizable to whatever it is you want it to do. Obviously, this isn't going to work perfectly, and there's a lot of tweaks that you could make. But you can imagine the potential you can have with something like this, right? You can use this to scrape real estate. You could use this to scrape e-commerce. You could use this to scrape really anything that you want. And if you knew the kind of website you wanted to scrape, you could customize this even more, give it a better prompt, give it more information. And you could even make this kind of go back and forth where you could ask multiple questions and just keep going and refining the result that you want to get. So much potential here with this type of AI web scraping. This really just scratches the surface. Hello, my name is Salim Al-Bassoum. Welcome to this video. And we're going to be building out a workflow like this. It probably looks maybe a bit scary, but it's very, very simple in nature. And it's going to allow us to go through any website and essentially extract information. We're going to be going through two today. One is going to be a simple website that I created here. And the other website is going to be a Yelp listing, right? So we're going to go through all of the different listings on Yelp, right? And we're going to pull out each business one by one, go to the business page, and then we're going to extract all the information that we want, right? Such as the website and the phone number and the business name and all of that kind of stuff. So let's kind of take a look at how this works. We're going to run this scenario. I'm just going to run this on the Yelp page, but we're only going to pull in one listing just to keep the operations low, just because we're testing right now. But we just push this live into the spreadsheet, and here we go. We have the company name, we have their phone number, we have all the services that they offer, and the website that we can find off of, well, their website, instead of just the Yelp website. And then we can add context and date. And there's going to be a couple of ways we're going to go about doing this. So there's no one real way to scrape a website, but I'll be showing you multiple different ways from easy to hard. So let's dive in. Let's recreate this. The blueprints are going to be down below for you guys to download, so you don't have to recreate the whole thing. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to this channel because I'll be making tons of videos just like this one we're watching. Okay, perfect. So we're going to recreate this in make.com. We're going to create a new scenario. And the first thing we want to do is use this HTTP module. So essentially what this does is it allows us to make a request to a particular website. There's a lot of different actions here. really the only one we need to make is make a request. All of these other ones are just more advanced ways of making a request where there's maybe verifications you have to log in or have credentials to access resources. We're just making a basic request to a basic website that's publicly displayed. So we don't actually have to authenticate or anything, right? So we just have to create a basic request. And there's a couple steps that we have to put in here. So the first thing we're going to do is scrape this website, and we essentially want to pull up the phone number and we want to pull up the email here, right? So what we're going to do is first of all copy the URL and paste it into the URL field here, right? So this is what the website is that we're going to be scraping. And there's multiple methods that we can choose: get, post, put, patch, delete. So essentially what this means is it's coding jargon for how do you want the module to react, right? In a get method, you're requesting information. So you're just saying, hey, give me this information. This is what I'm looking for. So we're just looking for a static file on the website. So get is fine for us. Post is if we're like, hey, let's send information to a different server to save, right? Maybe like you have a database and you're sending like information about somebody. Put is update, delete is delete, right? So in this particular module, we're just requesting information. So we can go ahead and select get. We don't have to enter in anything for the headers or the query string because it's a very simple request that we're having, and we can choose application xwww form URL encoded. Doesn't really matter what you put here. And we'll click OK. And we're going to run. Okay, sweet. So we have officially run it, and we already have received an output back. So you can see there's two different things on the screen. You can see the input, right? And then the output, and this is what we care about here, right? So the output, you see a status code here, 200, which means, hey, good job, nothing broke or nothing failed, so we're good to go. You can see headers, cookies, but really what we want to know is data. And essentially what's going on here is it's scraping the entire page, all the code, right? Very similarly, if you opened up the Google Developer Console and you saw all this code here, this is essentially what it's pulling back. You can just open this up by hitting 3 dots, going down to more tools and developer tools here, and then opening it up, right? This is essentially what you're getting back is all of the code on a page. Now, what we have to do is we have to find the information we're looking for with the code of that particular page. And this is a lot more simple than you probably think. It does look a bit overwhelming. There's a ton of stuff, but the first thing we want to do is break it down to something that's like usable, right? For most people watching this, I'm sure you guys probably don't want to code or don't know how to code. And for the purpose of this tutorial, that's not the point. We want to make this really, really simple. So how we can start is by taking the code and just making it non-code, right? So just text so that it's very easy to work with. So we're going to use something called a parser. And you can click on the text parser here, and we're going to parse that page and essentially remove all of the HTML from that page. So we're just working with simple text. So all we have to do is click HTML to text, and we have to put in the data here, right? We'll click OK, and we'll run. It's going to give us this warning saying, hey, you shouldn't end with a parser. You can click ignore these warnings, go away, never ward me again, and then click run. And let's take a look at the results that we have. So all of a sudden it goes from all of this code to just text, right? Still certain, elements are here, but for the most part we have the page, right? Okay, so this is pretty cool. So we have, all the basic things here. Like if I was just to copy and paste this over here, I think this is probably in one of these frequently asked questions here. Let's pull this up. We should be able to actually find this on the page. Okay, so that doesn't look accessible, but let's see this one here. Okay, so top of the line equipment, right? So you can kind of see it here, all in one solution, top of the line equipment, editing your pictures for style custom software to make Fauna easy, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's pulling in the text directly off of the page. Cool. So that's the first step. Now what we want to do is we want to grab the phone number and the email, right? And it's actually just down below here. So how we can go about doing this is we can similarly use the text parser again, and just very simply, we can click match elements. And we're just going to use the built-in features in make.com to pull up the phone number and to pull out that email as well. So we can actually select the pattern email, and there's nothing that we have to do here. There's no way we have to format it. It's just going to find emails and pull it out for us. We can put this text in here and then run this again, and it should remove the email. Okay, awesome. So we have 2 matches for the emails here, right? So essentially it went through the page and it found 2 instances of this email. The reason why there's 2 instances of this email is because this is actually a hyperlink. So if I was to open up the email here, right, you can actually see if you zoom in that it says, you know, info@videokings.ca. And then there's these brackets and it says info@videokings.ca again. And the reason why it says that again is just because it's a hyperlink. So if you click this, it would automatically push you to send an email to this email address. Okay, so let's say, for example, now we've got the email. We want to do the same thing, but this time we actually want to grab the phone number. We'll go back to the text parser again, and we will match. Actually, let's just click on this. We'll match elements again, right? And this time we're going to load in the phone number here. We're going to pass that same text through here, and we'll try it again. So let's see what happens this time. Okay, sweet. So in the results, it's also giving us another number as well here. So match, there's the number, and we can download more. And you can see here that there's another match as well, right? So we've effectively already scraped a simple website and got the contact info in here, right? And you can have hundreds or thousands of these websites queued up in like a Google Sheet, and you can process all of these instantly, right? So that's pretty cool. So we have the information that we're looking for on this website. Now, a couple other things that we could do here. Let's just take a look at this website. We could try and pull in different elements of the website. So for example, maybe I want to pull in the header here, right? So capturing more than 1,000 events every single year. So what we could do is we could use a pattern to pull this out. But what would be more beneficial for something like this is to actually use the HTML, right? So if we go into the developer tools and we click more tools down here and we open up the developer tools and you hover over this, right, you should be able to see that it's an H2 tag, right? So what we can do is we can find everything in this H2 tag and say, hey, I want to grab all of the text within it, right? What actually might be a bit more simple is to actually grab the H1, because usually there's only one H1 on any given website, right? Or at least as an SEO principle, that's what the H1 is intended to be. So what we can do is we can grab everything in this H1. And how we want to do it is, of course, by, well, there's 2 options here. We can either use artificial intelligence, or we can use another path to pull it out. So let's try artificial intelligence. This time we're going to use ChatGPT, and we're going to, where is it? Create a message up at the top here. And we're going to click on this and just make sure that if you don't currently have ChatGPT, here you're going to have to connect it, right? So in my instance, I already have this. And if you're not able to use it, it's because you have to add money to it as well. Just make sure that you have like a balance of $5 or else it might not work. So we're going to select create a chat completion, and the model, we can just go ahead and use GPT-40, and we're going to create a message. So in this message, it'll be a system message, and we're providing context for ChatGPT to pull out everything in this H1 tag, right? So what we could say is, please pull out all the text in the first header tag on this website. Do not include the code, just the text in between the lines, in between the H1 tags And then we could say, here's the code, and then we could drop this down. In this case, we're actually going to want to pass the data here because this is going to contain the HTML, whereas this right here, we remove the HTML. So we can just give this a shot. I'm going to put 200 max tokens. This is how much you can essentially spend by using this particular completion. And we'll go ahead and run this and see what kind of result we get. So we ran into an error. Okay, that was pretty weird here, but essentially I just had to delete this and then redo the whole thing, and then it worked the second time. So now what we can do is we can give this a shot here. So we're going to run through this with the AI model that we just built here. And it's going to give us quite a few different responses here. And let's see what it provides us with. So you can see it's already given us 4. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to force stop this. We just want to make sure that with this, it's not giving us too many responses, and how we can stop this from happening is just putting the GPT module right in front of everything else. And we'll go ahead and ignore these warnings and run it one more time. Here we go. The reason why it's doing that, by the way, is because this one has like 2 responses, and in these responses it might have like multiple different matches. So it's just running this completion every single time for every single option here. So we've put it to the front, and let's see the response that it gave us for this. So it said wedding photography suite. So it did match correctly. If we go back to the website, it says wedding photography. So it understood right away that that what we were trying to do is pull out the text from the H1 tag. So that's a pretty simple way to go about doing it if you just don't want to have to focus on any pattern matching. But another way that we can go about doing this as well is by adding another module, and we can do match patterns. So we're gonna type in parser here, and we're gonna do match pattern advanced. And this can be super beneficial, and this definitely, if you're going to want to learn how to scrape websites, you're definitely going to want to know how to do this. So with this module, we have to provide it with a pattern and extract the information we're looking for with that pattern. So there's a couple options. Global match. If checked, the module will find all matches rather than stopping. You know, if you're looking for phone numbers, for example, maybe you want to grab all the phone numbers, but if you only want one result from the pattern, then I would say go ahead and check yes. So yes is for one result and no is for many results. Case sensitive, I think this is going to be fine either way, but usually I would keep it as case sensitive. Multi-line, you can keep no. Single line is no as well. And then continue this execution of the route, even if the module finds no matches. Yes, of course. Otherwise, if there's no matches found, it'll stop this whole thing from running. And then we have to create a pattern, and we have to add in the text, right? So first thing is first, we need to add the text that we need to scrape or find the data from, which is this HTML here, right? And for the pattern, we have to use something called regular expression, or regex. And how regex works is it essentially is like somewhat of coding where you don't have to code, I promise you. We're not going to be getting into that. This is going to be done automatically, but just the theory behind it is when you use something called regex, it essentially allows you to find patterns in a particular line or in a text, right? So if you have something like an H1 tag, right, with the keyword inside of it. And let me just kind of go back to showing you guys what that looks like, right? If we open the developer console here and we see this H1 tag here, and we want to pull up this, we can say in regular expression, hey, grab everything in between the H1 tag, right? And that's a simple way to use regex. And how we do this automatically without having any coding involved is by using ChatGPT to do this. Okay, so effectively, if we come back in here, what we want to do is pull in. So we'll open up the developer console. Once again, you can hit the 3 dots, more tools, and developer tools here. And you just want to find this wedding photography on the page. And we're going to go ahead and copy this element and then come into ChatGPT and say, please create a regex formula to extract the text within this H1 tag. And then it will come up with a pattern here. So here's the pattern, and we can just go ahead and copy this pattern over here, and we can paste it in here. Now, if you guys want to learn more about regex and all that kind of stuff, you can go over to something like regex.com, and you can even just test it out here, and you can paste in the expression that you're looking to test, and you can also paste in the text that you want the regular expression to be finding a pattern within below, and you can see that there is one match here, right? One match, and it did pull in this whole line of code here. So it is working, and you can learn more about regex if you're interested in this. But for me, I would personally rather just use ChatGPT because it's just so much faster. So let's go ahead and let's actually try this out. Let's run this and see what the results are that we get from this module here. Okay, sweet. So the value is wedding photography, right? So it did work without us having to do anything in terms of coding. We just copy and paste. We're using JavaScript, or sorry, we're using a regular expression here to pull out information. This obviously looks scary, but you don't really have to know what this actually does. You just need to get the result from ChatGPT, and this is going to be super common. If you want to use regular if you want to do scraping and you want to build the system yourself, you're going to need to know how to find patterns in the text and remove those patterns. And using ChatGPT, you can pretty much create any pattern pretty much instantly, and it's going to work most of the time the first time. So there we have it. We have scraped a website, right? A very simple website. We've got in things like the phone number and H1 tag, and we got the email down here, right? So we got some pretty useful information. But let's say that we want to turn this on steroids, right? We don't want to just do like one basic website. Maybe we want to go to something like Yelp, and we want to find all of the listings for a particular keyword. We want to scrape the search page, find all the listings, go into the listings page, and then scrape all of those websites one by one, right? How can we do something like that? Now we're going to build out a system that's a little bit more advanced to take your web scraping capabilities all the way to the next level. Okay, awesome. So we're going to go ahead and delete this page here. And we're going to try out Yelp now, right? So in Yelp, I just typed in landscaping services, and I put the location to New York, NY, United States. And all we have to do is copy this URL, okay? And next we're going to go back in, and we're going to create another web scraping module here. So in scenarios, we'll go back and create another module here. Okay, perfect. And very similarly, what we're going to do is we're going to have an HTTP module. We're going to make a basic request, and we're going to send it to this page, right? And the cool thing about this, in the URL, it's actually giving us all the information we need to not only come back to this particular page, but in the URL here, you can see find description, and it says landscaping, and this plus is representing a space, right? So it's landscaping services. So you can see the actual keyword here is landscaping services, and that's in the URL. Right, so as soon as we find this page, it's going to pull in these exact results. And then we also have the location, which is find location, and that is New York, right? New plus, the plus is the space sign, or the space, New York, and then United States, and all that kind of stuff. So these two values are presented in this URL, which is pretty cool. And on top of that, we're going to just use this to find the exact information. So method is get, and body can be application URL encoded. And we'll go ahead and run this one time and see the results here. So status code is 200, so it is a success. And the data, once again, is super overwhelming. There's like tens of thousands of lines of code here, right? So just super, super overwhelming, but we'll break it down. We're going to do the same thing like we did before. We're going to go into the text parser and we're going to do HTML to text. And we're going to use the data here, right? So we're going to copy that in and we'll run it one more time. We're going to ignore warnings. Sweet. So we have all of the text from that website as well now. And all this text actually does contain all of these listings, right? Which is pretty cool. So the next step that we want to do is we want to be able to find the exact URLs for all of these sites here so that we can open up these tabs one at a time and then go into the next page, which, for example, with True Green Lawn Care, we want to go into their Yelp page and we want to get things like the phone number and the website, maybe the directions, the name, all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's a two-step process. First, we need to know how to scrape the listing. And then once we get the listings with all the results, then we need to know how to actually find every single page and get the information off of every single page. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Firstly, we need to find the URL here. So let's just pull in one of these companies here. We're going to start with this. Let's just see. So let's do Sunrise Paving and Landscaping, right? So we're going to want to pull in this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this URL. We're going to find out where in this text it actually is so that we know how to take it out. Now, in these URLs, they don't actually include the HTTPS www.yelp.com, so we can go ahead and remove that, and it should help us find this. We're going to remove all this extra stuff as well, and it's not in here. Let's try this data here, and it's also not there. So let's find another listing to see if we can pull it in here. So we're going to go to this one and we're going to copy this URL here. So Moya Landscaping Brooklyn, copy that and come back in, and we're going to test this out in the HTML to text module here. We're going to open up the text field and we can see that this is now here, right? So this is pretty sweet. We have all of these links, right? So /biz/Moya-landscaping Brooklyn. But the problem is that there's just so many of these links, right? And in fact, there's probably hundreds on this particular page, right? So we have to figure out how we can get just one of these links and how we can get the same link or just one unique link for every single one of these business listings, one for Moya Landscaping, one for Mar Ventano's Landscaping, all of that kind of stuff, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create another module, and we're going to first of all find all of these links on the page. So we're going to do text parser, and we're going to do get elements from HTML, and we will do links here. We're going to actually start with this data here. So we'll click yes, just in case there's no links, it'll still continue. And let's give this a shot and see what it returns. So we scraped the page, converted it to text, and we got these links. Okay, sweet. So that's a lot of links, tons and tons and tons and tons of links, 343 to be exact. So how do we get the specific ones we're looking for, right? If I pull in this Moya Landscaping Brooklyn, I can see that they have 14 different links here, right? So the first thing is you can see they all start with /biz. So the first thing I want to do probably is make sure that we remove any links that don't have this in here. Right? So we need to set up a filtering step. the next module will be a flow control iterator. So we're going to go through every single one of these links, link by link. But before we do that, we just want to filter this out, and we'll return to this step in a second. So we'll call this filter, and the href link, it has to contain /biz/ right? So all the links that are currently in here that don't have that in there are not going to be passed through. So if we take a look at this, like this link here, like https www.axiom.com, this is not going to filter through. It's not going to pass because it's not the kind of link that we're looking for. So let's just open up all the results again, and let's see if we can find a particular link here that is different. So this one's OSQ, this one's OSQ, this one's OSQ, OSQ, but this one is HRID, OSQ, 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 OSQ. So let's look at these HR IDs here, right? Because now we're filtering it down. So let's say that it has to contain this in here. So we're going to filter it down and click an and rule, and the link has to contain as well this. But now we're stuck and we still have two links here that are the exact same. So let's go through this example one more time and see if we can find a difference between the two of these. Right? And maybe what we do is it also, so these actually, just looking at it, appear to be the exact same link, but I just realized that these are different parts of the page. So we're not actually looking up the element, we're only looking up the href here, that module. So we're actually going to be okay to proceed as is. We just need this HRID in here that makes it unique. And we can go ahead, save this, and we'll pass in this href, and let's test this out and see what we get here. So we're scraping the page, and it's provided us with 10 different links. So if I open up the output, here's one link. We can actually go ahead and open this link up. So let's delete this, and remember, we need to have yelp.com in front of it, and then paste this in. And here we go. So it has now opened up to this page, GNC. This is a different listing, but there's 10 different listings on this particular page, right? So it's going to pull in all of these different profiles here. So that's pretty cool. We have now managed to scrape on this page all of the different listings, right? 10 at a time. Okay, and what we can do now is, so we've pulled in the 10, we filtered out the other 350 links that don't matter, and now we have to iterate through them, which we had the attributes href, right? So the href here is just all the links that were like, these are the links that we're trying to find, and we're going to iterate over each one. So what iteration means is, say there's 10 links on the page. Here there's result 1, result 2, result 3, 4, 5, and 6, and so on and so forth. We're going to go through each of those links individually, and then have a separate kind of mini workflow for all of them. So we're going to go through each one, and we're going to find the business name, business phone number, services they offer, and all that kind of stuff, right? Individually, one at a time. Okay, so that's pretty cool. We can save this, and what we need to do now is actually go to that particular page. So we'll have another HTTP module here, and we're going to make a request. And this time we're going to go to the URL that is denoted by the href here. Actually, sorry, the value here. So if we open up the value, you can see it's this link right here. Sweet. But if we just open this up, it's not going to go to anything, right? So what we need to do is make sure that for this particular link to work, we need to pass in the HTTPS yelp.com in front of it, and then it will work exactly as intended. So let's put this in front of it, and we're going to remove this backslash. This is going to be a get method. We'll do application URL encoded and save that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to run this one more time and see how this works. Now I'm actually going to stop this before it finishes because it's going to actually load up all of these pages here one at a time, and we can actually see the results coming in. Right, so it's just going through every single one of these pages. Now, a couple things on this is I'm going to stop this quickly here. It's going to throw the error because I stopped it. We want to make sure that we have enough time in between each one of these pages, because if you just start, sending tens or hundreds or thousands of results or inquiries to particular pages, what's going to happen is Yelp or any real software company is going to rate limit you. What rate limiting means is they're going to say, hey, you've literally come to this website like 10,000 times in the last, 2 minutes. And, we can't have people doing that because it's slowing down the user experience for everyone else and it's draining our resources. And this is clear that you're scraping our information, which Yelp may or may not want you to do, right? So in order to get around that, you need to put a delay between every single scrape. So maybe you want to have 15 seconds or 20 seconds in between every single time that you perform another website scrape. So how we can go about doing that is having a sleep function here. So we'll add a module called sleep. It's in tools, and then in tools you go to sleep, and sleep essentially means we're going to delay for a certain amount of time. Now you could set this to 15 seconds, right? And when you run this module again, when it gets to that step, it's not going to pause. And it's going to say, hey, I got to wait 15 seconds before we can continue with the rest of this. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and just do one more thing here. I want to make sure that we only bring in one particular value here, because as we're testing this out, I don't want to be running 10 different web scrapes at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a filter, and I'm going to say the value has to be equal to this. And as long as it is, we'll pass. So we're just going to start with one web scrape at a time, just so that we can kind of, get to this module faster. But obviously, if you want to scrape 10 or 100 or 1,000, you'd remove this and you just let it run. So let's run this one more time. And let's continue on with this web scraping here. Okay, so we've hit the wait step. And also when you're testing here, guys, too, you probably want to remove this wait step as well so that you're not having to wait 15 seconds every single time, because otherwise that's a massive, massive pain in the butt. Okay, so we have scraped everything. I'm going to first set this to 1 second, and then we have this next page. So a couple things we may want to do. Maybe we want to convert this into text, right? So instead of it being straight up just all HTML, it's just text. So we've done that, and we're going to actually work with this. In order for us to be able to work with it, we have to run the scenario one more time and get the live feedback. Sometimes when you're running the scrape, it doesn't work 100% effectively every single time. So if you do run into an error there that it doesn't work, you just can go ahead and run it again, and it should work the second time. Oh, okay, awesome. So we have the text. Here's that whole page. So now, what do we actually want to get from here? So let's pull up our sheet. We probably want to get the company and the email and the phone and the services and the website and the context and the date, right? Date, sorry, we're not going to get the date. That's going to come afterwards. But we want to get some of these other fields here. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I want to give you the tools that you guys need to be able to succeed with this, so that when you inevitably do it yourself, you'll know exactly how this works. So we'll go through a combination of multiple different factors. So the first thing that we could do, just to make it super simple, is we could use GPT. Okay, so let's actually load up this exact URL here and see what we're working with. So I want to make sure I get the right one. Okay, So it is this landing page here, this page GNC. Okay, so let's say the first thing that we want to do is grab let's say services offered. So a simple way for us to do that without even having to go pretty advanced with the web scraping is just using ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, we're going to create a completion and we'll use the GPT-4o model. And the message we're going to do is a system message. And we'll have a simple prompt which we direct ChatGPT to find the services on the page and extract that information. But we also don't want to just have it run wild and answer a bunch of other stuff that we don't care about. All we want is just bullet point form all the way down all of the services that this company offers, and how we can do that is structuring the prompt here properly. So let's say, please find all the services this Yelp listing provides me the information in a list format with no additional information. Keep it brief, please. Here is the website. And we can provide this data here. And click OK. Oh, we just got to go back and change the tokens. I'll put 200. Click OK, save, and let's give this a run and see how well ChatGPT does at extracting this information here. So services offered, right? Should have all of these. Okay, so it's giving me another error here. So invalid message, content string is too long. Okay, so if that's the case, what we can do is we can use this text string instead, which is going to be significantly shorter because we're removing, once again, all the HTML out of there, right? Because with HTML, it's like 36,000 characters. You can see it stopped here, so we'll just start again. With HTML, it's insanely long. It's like 36,000 characters. Now we're just going to give it the text here, which is going to be much easier for it to understand. And let's see the results. So it gave us 8. So garden installation and garden maintenance is the second one, which is correct. And then commercial services is the third. Lawn maintenance is the fourth. Yard cleaning is the fifth. Sod installation is the sixth. Landscaping maintenance is the seventh, and lawn seeding is the eighth. So this was perfect. It literally gave us exactly what we wanted without having to do anything. Now, if you guys want, you could literally just do this for pretty much the entire website scraping process, or use ChatGPT to just automatically extract everything that you want. But I'm going to give you one more option here, and that is to use regex. And I think it is very important if you guys truly want to learn how to web scrape to be able to do both, because certain things ChatGPT may not be able to extract as well as you'd like it to, and it's good to be able to find information on a page with the exact pattern you have. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out this website here, okay, and then the phone, and then we'll pull out the business name here. So with this particular website, let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this, come back in here, and I want to find this information in the text here, right? So here is the particular website. So what we need to do is we need to copy this and use ChatGPT to effectively help us find this pattern using regex. Once again, we're not going to be using code whatsoever, right? We're not going to be doing anything super fancy. We're just going to allow ChatGPT to do the bulk of the work for us so that we can extract the exact pattern that we're looking for. So we have our text here. We'll go back to ChatGPT, and we're going to make another regex formula. Regex is just the name for regular expressions in JavaScript, which we use patterns to find information that we're looking for. So please use a regex pattern to extract the URL from this text. And then we will put a period here and add one more line here. Please find the URL in between these two lines of text. And we'll put everything here. Everything here. And we're going to put this bracket here. And the reason why we're doing it like this, and I'm going to zoom in here, is because on all of these lists, you need to make something robust that is going to work for, of course, this page, but then the other 10,000 you scrape as well. And if you use this particular URL here, well, it's not going to work because this URL is always going to be different, but these three dots will always be the same, no matter what, with this bracket. And then this square bracket to the back will always be the same. So we can go ahead and test this out and see what it gives us. We can even try and use this to see if it works here with the regular expression. Let's copy and paste this in. And it says no match is found. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to try this anyways to see if it works when we load it in here. Okay, so, delete this. We'll add another module. We're going to use text parser, match pattern advanced, not a global match. We'll continue with everything here. Continue with the execution. This is important that it's turned on. Here's the pattern. And then we're going to pull in this text here. And let's give this a shot and see if it works. Okay. Sweet. So let's see the result here. So it looks like it actually pulled in an image here, right? So obviously that is not what we're looking for. So we need to come back and change this regex formula so that we can get that website instead of this URL. All right, so let's try this again. We're going to go into the text. And we had tried this before. Let's see if there's another example here anywhere where the URL is the same. Okay, so it's right here. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to redo this regex formula here. And we're going to change the intro being loading interface because that will always be the same, right? And then the bracket at the end there. And that's all we're changing. And oops, we actually need to change one more thing here. And that is pulling in all this information and replacing the example here just so it knows exactly what to work with. And let's try this again and see. So we're doing the same thing. It's just instead of using this link, we're using this link, and we're using the loading interface with the square bracket here as the starting point, and then the square bracket at the end is the ending point. And this is a pretty robust solution in my opinion. I think it'll work right away because we're using 2 points, the starting point and the ending point, which is never going to change, and it's completely unique to the whole website page. So there's not going to be multiple different instances where we might get lost and pull in the wrong link by mistake. So let's go ahead and and try this out. We're going to use the new pattern that it just created for us. And let's run this. I'm just making sure. Okay, sweet. All right, so here is the website that is giving us. And that also, so that was actually pretty close. It did load in the URL, but it did forget this /biz, right? So come back up here. We can just edit this to make sure that it keeps everything that we want in here. So like the exact URL. So the last line of defense we can do here is we can just make sure that we provide it with an example of what it looks like that we're trying to extract. And then from there, it should work every single time. So we'll copy this URL back one more time, find this, and we're gonna copy the text that we're trying to do. I guess I could have just copied it from right here and just put one more line in here. The URL that we are trying to extract should look like this. And then we'll remove the loading interface here, remove everything past here. This URL will change every time, but I want to make sure that we match everything between these 2 points. Okay, let's try it one last time. Pray to the regex gods that this is going to work properly and copy this in. All right, we'll circle back and give this a shot. Click run. And the cool thing is like with regex, it doesn't work every single time. The first time you do have to try it out multiple times, but eventually if you give it the exact, and this is my mistake, I should have given it the exact answer as to what we're looking for so that it knows how the output should be formatted, right? I didn't give it the output, so it didn't give me the exact format I was looking for. But once you give it an example of what it is that you want, it should be quite clear. So if we come over here and we open this up right into a new tab and paste it, remember we have to have the yelp.com in front of it. This should go to the right page, so it's going to redirect us now over to this person's website. So now it works. We got the URL out with regular expression. So that's pretty cool. We've done that. And then let's say that we want to remove the phone number as well, right? We can simply do that again by copying this module, duplicating it, and providing a pattern to pull out a 9-digit phone number. So if we come into GPT again, I'm going to make another regular expression and say, hey, please pull out a 9-digit phone number in this format. The number will always change, but the formatting will stay the same. And this should work. We'll copy this over and paste it in. And we'll run that as well. And let's see if this time it works on the first round. Cool. So we got the fallback match here, and this looks pretty good. So we can see that we received the phone number as it stands right there. And then maybe the last thing that we want to do is pull out this this particular name here, right? Which may be slightly challenging here. So what we'll do is we'll just copy and clone this last module over here, and we'll create another regular expression to get this out. But if we look at the actual name on the page, if we come into the example of what that text looks like, there's a lot of different locations that this is in, right? So you do have a lot of different options here. So essentially what we want to do is find text that's unique before it, and then find text that's unique after it, right? So what we could do is we could say, let's pull this in and create another, and this will be the last regular expression that we create before we wrap up this video. But let's say we have another, we want to pull the name. We can paste this in as the example, and we need to direct GPT to get this company's name out of here, right? So how do we do that? Well, we want to tell it to pull in all the text in between the starting point people found and before by searching for. And if we actually quickly Command F, this only appears once on this page, right? So this is going to be a one-shot value where we don't have to test this out, or there's not going to be multiple results that are being returned. So we'll tell ChatGPT to provide a regex formula to pull out a company name. I want to pull out everything between 2 points of text. The start will be people found, and the end will be by searching for. The result will always change, but in this instance should be GNC landscaping. Here's an example of what the text is that you'd find that you need to use regex on. Okay, there we go. And we can copy this code in. And hopefully, by praying to the regex gods here, this will be working just fine the first time. Okay. So it looks like we actually had an error here. That's weird. I'm going to run this one more time and just see if that happens again, because that was just a random error. And you will encounter random errors like that, and the goal would be to fix those over time. Sweet. Okay, so the value is this. Now, obviously, as you saw with that random error, it's not going to work every single time, right? And you will have to do a bit more work to make sure it's perfect. But this is a pretty good start of how we just automatically scraped a listing page and then went to an actual, well, this is the actual service page, but like, you know, if we scraped the listing page on Yelp, we found all of the listings one by one and we went through them. If you want to obviously scrape more than just one at a time, you just remove this filter and change this, right? And then it's good to go. So the last step we want to do is just add this into a Google Sheet here. And then we're good to go. So we'll add a row and we're going to add it to this sheet here. Choose the right accounts if you have multiple. We're going to select from all. And we just need to pull in this ID here for the Google Sheet. Copy that, pop it in here, and it will locate that sheet for us. And we need to map the values, right? So effectively, we have the information from make.com. We want to make sure that that information is placed on the spreadsheet. So we need to, when we're scraping these companies, place the company that we scraped in the company row or column A, then their email, if we have that information in column B, their phone in column C, the services in column D, all of that kind of stuff, right? So how we go about doing that is just pulling in the values here. So the company name is going to be this value here. Oops. Okay, awesome. And then the email, we didn't actually get it from Yelp. They don't have an email on those pages or the directory pages for businesses, but we certainly have the phone number here, which is this fallback match. And then the services can be found in the ChatGPT response and under choices, under message in content. And then the website can be this right? We just need to put HTTPS Yelp.com in front of that. The context we didn't sort here, and in the date that we scraped this information, we'll go into the date formatter here, and we're going to create a date where we format it right so it looks nice. You can see that these are kind of some of the options. This is probably what it would look like if you just put the now in there. I'll hover over that again. So it would be pretty unstructured, right? But I just want to prettify the date so it looks a bit better. And how we can go about doing that is just putting DD for the day, MMM for the month, and 4 Ys for the year. And then it'll sort itself out. Okay, we'll click save. And let's give this a run and see if this value appears on column or row 4 here from the automation. Okay, sweet. So it just went through and we pulled it in. We have GNC Landscaping, phone number, services, link to their website, and the date that we scraped this information. So that is, hello, my name is Salim Al-Bassoum. Welcome to this video. All right, so this is the full N8N workflow that we're going to go over in this video. We've got the bottom portion right here, which is what actually leverages Crawl for AI to scrape a bunch of pages and put it in a Supabase vector store for RAG. And then the top part here is a very simple proof of concept implementation for an AI agent leveraging this knowledge base. And so this is basically following what we built within Python in the last couple of videos on my channel. So before, we built everything directly within a Python script here. So we pull all the pages from Pydantic AI, we scrape through all of them using Crawl for AI, and then put them into our Supabase vector storage, just like we're going to do in N8N. But we're going to do it now with no code at all. So say goodbye to this code. We're doing it all in N8N. And just as a review, I'm going to be using the exact same documentation here for Pydantic AI as the example. It's just a great resource to use, because it's the kind of site that we are okay scraping. It's really important to keep in mind. I have to preface this video. You want to scrape ethically. There are a lot of websites that block scrapers and request you to not scrape, and it is important to follow those rules. The way that you can check generally is if you go to a website like youtube.com and you add in /robots.txt, you'll see some rules right here that help you understand when and how you can scrape. A lot of times they'll say don't scrape at all. The terms of use is also another good place to check for any given website or platform, just to make sure that you're following the rules and scraping ethically. So with that in mind, which we can do for the Pydantic AI documentation, I want a quick way to get all of the web pages available right here. So basically all the navigation that we have right here, I want to be able to pull all of these URLs for myself within the N8N workflow. And the way that we're going to be doing that is with what is called a sitemap.xml. So if you add /sitemap.xml to the end of a lot of websites, like documentation pages and e-commerce stores, you'll get this XML right here that gives you, most of the time, every single web page that is available on this site. And so we can parse this within our N8N workflow, just like we did with Python before, to get all the web pages, then scrape them one at a time with Crawl for AI. So that actually is the start of this workflow. But before we even get into building out this N8N workflow, and I'll go through this in a good amount of detail for you, we first need to actually get Crawl for AI deployed so that we can use it as an API endpoint within N8N. So back when I had the Python code before, we just imported Crawl for AI as a library. But now we need to call into an API endpoint where we have Crawl for AI hosted externally with Docker. And so before we get into this, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And don't worry, it is super easy. Here we are in the Crawl for AI documentation. Now, back when I was using Python and not N8N, I just had to go to the installation tab to get started. I used pip, which is the Python package manager, to install Crawl for AI, and then I imported it directly in my Python scripts and used it there. But in N8N, we do not have the same choice. There is not a place to run this pip install command. And it's not like we can use this right within any Python scripts. It's just not a dependency that is available to us. And so for N8N, we have to deploy Crawl for AI in a completely different way. And that is why I mentioned Docker just a minute ago. Docker is our ticket to deploy Crawl for AI in a way where we can actually interact with it as an API endpoint. And that is what we're going to do within our N8N workflow. So going back over that really quickly, and again, I'm going to go over this workflow in a lot of detail in a little bit. These HTTP request nodes are where we are interacting with Crawl4AI. So I have this API endpoint set up that I have hosted in the cloud, and I'll show you how to do it with Docker. This is just waiting for us to send requests to crawl specific websites. So we give it a URL to crawl, and it'll return the markdown and the links to the images, and it'll have the HTML, everything back over to us so that we can then process that and put it in our knowledge base for RAG. And so that's what we're going to do right now, getting a Docker set up. And it's important to note there are a few different ways that we can install Crawl4AI with Docker. The first option is we could actually include Crawl4AI, the Docker image, within our local AI starter kit. That is a fantastic option that we'll probably cover in another video. So let me know in the comments if you're interested in seeing that. The other solution I'm going to show right now is not doing that, just because I want something a little bit more universal. And I'll get to that as my last solution here. The second option is that you can run Crawl4AI just by running this container locally or on the cloud instance that you already have running N8N if you are self-hosting N8N. So it's a fantastic way to do it if you don't want to spend any more to have a dedicated instance for Crawl4AI. Because if you're already paying for the machine to self-host N8N, or you're just running it locally on your machine, you don't have to pay anything. Now, there is one thing to keep in mind though, and that is the Crawl4AI Docker container is a little bit of a resource hog because it is running an entire headless browser to scrape the web for you. So it does take a good amount of CPU and RAM. And so I actually would recommend hosting this separately, because if your Crawl4AI instance is getting really bogged down, you don't want this hosted on the same place as your N8N, because that might slow down your N8N as well. And so I would recommend hosting it as an entirely separate instance in the cloud. And that is what I'm going to show you how to do right now. So if you do just want to host it right on your computer or right in an instance that you already have running N8N, you can just run these commands right here. You can pull the image from Docker, obviously as long as you already have a Docker installed, and then you can run it. And you can also optionally run it with a secret token so that you can protect your endpoints. Not everyone can just use it to use your Crawl4AI. And so yeah, these two commands, it's all you need to get started. It is so easy. Now the more complicated setup is when you actually want to have it as a dedicated API endpoint. And so that's what I'm going to cover right now. There are a lot of platforms out there to run a Docker container as an API endpoint. The one that I have found the easiest by far though is DigitalOcean. I cover DigitalOcean quite a bit on my channel. I love their product, not sponsored by them in any way. I just use them for my instances in the cloud and also things like this, and I'm just about to show you for Docker deployments. And so the way that you can deploy Crawl4AI within DigitalOcean is using their app platform. So I'm going to click on this to create a new app platform. And you can pull from a Git repository, which is super neat. But in this case, I'm going to pull from a container image here. And the Crawl4AI container images are hosted here on Docker Hub. And so I just went to hub.docker.com, search for Crawl4AI, and this gives me all of the images that are currently available for the different architectures that we have here. And so I'm going to select Docker Hub, and then the repository that I want, I'm just going to look at the version that I want right here. Now for deploying the DigitalOcean, the version that you want specifically is basic AMD 64. That's just the Linux architecture that they have for DigitalOcean. So this is the one that you're going to want to use. So specifically the repository is going to be unclecode/Crawl4AI, and then the image tag is going to be basic-AMD 64. And I can just get that by looking right here in a Docker Hub. So I can see it's unclecode/Crawl4AI. Unclecode is the GitHub username of the creator of Crawl4AI, by the way. Super awesome guy. And then yeah, basic-AMD 64 is the tag that we have after the colon. So that's how we figure out these two things. Then I'll go ahead and click on next. Now we can identify the resource that we want. And so this is really up to you. I'm going to click on edit for the resource size here. You can go as cheap as $5 a month. So you can get some dirt cheap app platforms up here on DigitalOcean. Just keep in mind that you're probably going to need more RAM and vCPUs for running Crawl4AI, because again, it is running an entire browser under the hood. And so you might even need upwards of 4 GB of RAM if you're crawling a ton of pages at once. Just keep that in mind, and we can tweak things in the N8N workflow to have smaller batch sizes and things to work with smaller instances if you want. So I'm just going to select this one. and it's $50 a month, but I'm just going to remove this after the day. So I'm just paying a couple of bucks to get my knowledge base ready, and then I can remove this app platform, and it's so easy to deploy it again if I want. And I'll move the containers down to 1 instead of 2, so it's just a base $50 a month. And then for the port right here, I need to change it from 8080 to the actual port that we have for Docker, which is this 11235. So I'll go ahead and paste that there and then click save. And that is everything that we have to do for our resource configuration. So go ahead and click on next. And now the only other thing that we have to really define here is our environment variable for security. So again, we could just not include this environment variable so that our API endpoint for Crawl4AI is unprotected. But I definitely want to include that protection here and encourage you to do the same. And so our environment variable is just called Crawl4AI API token. So I'm going to add this as a global environment variable here. And then the value is going to be whatever you want your bearer token to be. So I'm just going to say test auth. I'm going to obviously delete this after I record this video. So I'm just hard coding this and making it visible to you. This is going to be my bearer token for my Crawl4AI endpoint. So I'll go ahead and click on next. We got our environment variables defined now. And then we can review our info, make sure that everything looks good, which it sure does. And then I'll go ahead and click on create a resource. And it is that easy. Within a couple of minutes here, it's going to go and actually build this container for me, get everything set up in my environment. Within just a couple of minutes, we'll have Crawl4AI available to us. And the app platform here in DigitalOcean automatically gives us an SSL protected full HTTPS endpoint ready for us to hit within our N8N workflow. There we go. Just a couple minutes later, we are completely live and we have this URL for us to access our app deployment now. And actually, if I go to the home page, it just takes me right to the home page of the documentation for Crawl4AI. And I can also hit the health endpoint here, which is just a part of the container. And I can see, yep, I've got a status of healthy. Gives me some stuff for the CPU and memory usage as well. Super neat. So easy to set this up with DigitalOcean. And again, a lot of other platforms to do it. I'm just showing you as an example here of something I would recommend. Also, this entire thing is optional if you're just going to be running the container yourself or where you are hosting N8N. And I'll talk about how you can use that as well in the N8N workflow, how you would adjust URL to work with localhost. And the documentation for Docker deployment does cover that as well, because it shows you, I mean, this is the URL that you would use instead of what I'm going to show you when you just have it hosted alongside your N8N instance or on your computer locally. So with that, we can dive into our N8N workflow and actually leverage our new crawl for checking it out. This entire N8N workflow that I'm about to go over with you right now, I have in a GitHub repository that I have linked in the description of this video. So you can download this for yourself right now. Bring it into your own N8N instance and then customize it to your heart's content to do whatever you want for Crawl4AI. Because keep in mind, what I'm building out right here with you, this is just a proof of concept to really lay the foundation for you to use Crawl4AI within N8N. And the rest of the stuff in that GitHub repository, that's the Python code, the Python version of what we're building right here. So definitely check that out as well if you're curious. And also the Python version of this agent, the Pydantic AI Expert, I have hosted for you right now on the Automator Live Agent Studio. So you can go to studio.automator.ai. You get some tokens for free to play with these agents. So you can go to the Pydantic AI Expert and try this out right now without having to run anything. So you can have a conversation with this guy just to test it out with your questions on the Pydantic AI docs and just see what you're getting yourself into by building this with me. So it is the Python version. So it's not the exact same what we're building here, but it has very much the similar functionality. And so with that, let's get into building out our N8N workflow. The first thing that we want to do is get a list of URLs that we want to scrape with Crawl4AI. And in this specific use case, we are doing that through that sitemap.xml file that I showed you earlier for the Pydantic AI docs. And so I'm going to click on test step right here, which by the way, I'm going to do this for every single step along the way so we can really dive into how this process works. And yeah, I get the XML back. So exactly what we see right here. This is what we have for the output of our first node. And then next, we want to convert this into JSONs. This is just much, much better to work with within N8N. So now we have a list of all of the URLs for the Pydantic AI documentation. Now, the next thing that we have to do, if you notice this right here, N8N still thinks this is a single item, but we really wanted to recognize each of these right here as a separate item, each with a URL for a page to scrape. And so that's what this node does right here. We split out based on this value right here. So it's URL set dot URL and returning them all into individual items. So now N8N truly recognizes them each as individual items in a list so that we can loop over each one of them now. And so I'll click on test step, and there's a little bug in N8N where sometimes it won't actually show the output when you're running test step. To fix this, you just have to refresh. So I could just kind of cut that out. But I wanted to show that too, because this could probably going to happen to you as you're playing around with N8N workflows as well. So I thought that'd be useful. So you just refresh and then click on test step for the current step that you want to see the output of. And so that is this loop right here. So when we click on test step in a loop, it's just going to show us the first item in a loop, which is the home page for the Pydantic AI documentation. The second item would be the second page that we see right here. Third item would be this one, and so on. And so yeah, we got the location right here and the last modification date as the first item in our loop. And then this, by the way, is where you can update the batch size as well. So if you want to process 5 URLs or 10 URLs at the same time, you can adjust this right here. Just make sure that your instance can handle it, because remember, Crawl for AI can be a CPU and RAM hog. So really be careful with this one. And I'm just sticking to a batch size of 1 to keep it simple right here. And I think the rest of this workflow would actually have to be modified a little bit if you do have a higher batch size than just 1. So again, this is just a proof of concept to get you started here with Crawl for AI. I want that to be the focus of this video. So we get this item right here. Now we can move on to the rest of this workflow. The rest of what we see right here is all running within the loop. So for every single one of the 49 items that we pulled right here, we're going to run everything for each one of those, because that is what we're going to do to scrape and then put in Supabase for RAG. So we're making our first API request to Crawl for AI now. And so you can see that the URL that I have right here matches exactly with what we have in the app that we set up in DigitalOcean. And if you are hosting Crawl for AI locally, if you're running the Docker container on your computer or in the same instance where you are hosting N8N, then you would just have to change this to localhost port 11235 and then update this to HTTP as well. So going back to the Docker deployment page for Crawl for AI, if I scroll down to the first example, they actually show you this URL. So if you're hosting the Docker container on your own infrastructure, just referencing it with localhost, this is exactly the URL that you would use instead of what I'm using right here to connect to DigitalOcean. So I do want to cover those different ways that you might be hosting a Crawl for AI when you're referencing it in N8N. So that's the URL. And then for the authentication right here, I go back to the documentation. We specifically set it up so we have this bearer token here. So again, going back to DigitalOcean, and I go to my environment variables here, I have this environment variable set up for the bearer token. I just have the value of test auth. And so going back to N8N, we set up a generic credential type, and we have it as header auth. And the way that you want to set up this credential here, I'll just create new credentials to show you an example. The name has to be authorization, because that's the header name for a bearer token. And then the value here, I'm going to go to an expression view so you can actually see what I'm typing. You want to type bearer and then a space, and then whatever that value is that you set up in your environment right here, or just whatever you specified right here when you ran the container if you are hosting it locally. So I said test auth for my value. So within N8N is bearer space and then test auth. So I'm going to close out of this and I'm going to refresh because I already have it set up. So let me just go back to this node right here. All right, so we got our URL, we figured out our credentials, and now we have the body of our request. And so this, again, just going back to the documentation, I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm very much following the documentation and showing you how to incorporate it into N8N. So the JSON, this is our payload. We have 2 values here. First of all, we have URLs, and I don't know why this is plural. You just give one URL here. I actually tried it with multiple, comma separated, and it did not work. So you just give one URL here that you want to scrape. And then you have a priority as well, because the Crawl for AI Docker container supports running all of this in queues. So you give the sites that you want to scrape in queues, and you can define priorities so that you can define the order in which your requests are actually handled by your Crawl for AI deployment. I'm not going to get into that here because I want to keep things simple, but just know that there is so much documentation they have here for so many things you can do to customize your Crawl for AI deployment as well. I'm going to keep it simple, but yeah, just know that there is a lot available to you. And so going back to N8N, for the body URLs, I just have the JSON.location, so that pulls the URL from the last node that is executed. And then we have the priority of 10. So I'm just not using this here, but I'm really just showing you that I'm following the documentation exactly by including this here. So let's go ahead and run this. And so when we get back here, it's not quite what we would expect. We get a task ID. What the heck is a task ID? I thought it was going to scrape and give me the markdown of the HTML back. Well, let's go and look at the documentation. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So when we scrape the /crawl URL, not when we scrape it, when we call it to scrape for us, it's going to give us back a task ID. And the reason we're doing this is because scraping a website might take longer than you would usually have an HTTP request go for. So you're essentially kicking off a task and then given a task ID so you can check up on the status of the task later on. So I can ping this endpoint. So instead of /crawl, it's /task and then the task ID to essentially ask my crawl for AI instance for the status of this specific scrape task that I gave it. And so if I go out of here and I click on wait, that's going to wait 5 seconds. And then I have this second request that is going to call the task endpoint with the ID that I got from the first request to, again, ask crawl for AI, hey, what's the status of this request? And if the request is fulfilled, we will actually get the HTML and the link to all the images and the markdown and all of that. So let me actually refresh N8N. We hit that weird little bug again. So I'm going to refresh N8N, go back and kick off right from this node right here. So I'm going to click on test step, and we're going to have to wait 5 seconds for that wait step, but it's going to kick off the crawl task. And then right here, we ping the task based on the task ID that we got from our first HTTP request. So yeah, we'd get that, wait 5 seconds, and then we check on the status. And within 5 seconds, the crawl task has already complete. So we instantly get back everything that is great for us. So we have the URL, the HTML. There's a ton of information here because it gives us all of the links and it gives us the markdown. If I go all the way down, we got all the markdown here. So we got everything that we could possibly want from that scrape task. And then we also have the status here, which it's completed right now. But if this was still processing, and I think I'll probably show you this later as well, it'll say pending or processing instead of completed. And so then right after this request here, we have this if statement where we basically just check to see if the status is completed. And if it is not completed, if the if statement is false, then what we want to do is loop back around, wait another 5 seconds, and then check again. So we're in this infinite loop here, basically just every 5 seconds asking our crawl for AI deployment, is the task complete yet? Is the task complete yet? And then finally, once it is, status will be completed so that this if statement will be true. And then we can do the last step here, which is taking the markdown that we pulled from this job that we ran and adding it into our knowledge base. So I'm going to click on this task right here, hit the true branch because the status is completed. And so now that's going to guide us into the final step of inserting into our knowledge base. We have finally gotten to Supabase now, which is super exciting. So for the embedding model, I am just using OpenAI Text Embedding 3 Small. Connect to my API key. It's super easy to do that, by the way. You just have to click on Open Docs right here, and it'll guide you through how to get your API key, which you can basically do for anything in N8N. And it just makes it so easy to get all of your credentials. And then for the data loader, I'm just using the default data loader. And then the data specifically, I'm getting by result.markdown. So from the output of the last node, it's json.result.markdown. And then also for the metadata here, it's not super important, but I'm specifying the page that this chunk came from as well, which is just nice to have in the database. I can see exactly what page from the Pydantic AI documentation this specific chunk that is created came from. And then for the splitter, I'm just using a text splitter with a chunk size of 5,000. I didn't put a ton of thought into how I'm chunking my data for rank here. You can definitely play around with this for your use case specifically and see what just gets the best results for you. And then for the node itself with Supabase, all I had to do to connect my Supabase account is I just had to give it my host, which is my Supabase URL, and then my service role secret. So I have this Supabase project created right here. I just went down to the bottom here to my project settings to the API tab, copied my URL, which is right here, and then I revealed and copied my service role secrets. Those are the two things for your Supabase credentials. And then the only other thing that you have to do is set up your table to actually store the knowledge base in Supabase. And the way that you can do that they have a very good starter template for you. So if I click on the docs right here in the Supabase vector store node, and then scroll down to a quick start for setting up your vector store, click on this, find the SQL to execute right here. Copy everything starting on line 4 because the vector extension is already enabled in Supabase by default. Just copy this right here. And then you go over to Supabase, go to the SQL editor, and then paste in everything right here. So you're going to paste in this and then click on run in the bottom right here. And then that'll automatically create your documents table and this match documents function, which is what actually performs reg on your Supabase knowledge base. So now in the table editor, I have this documents table right here, which is currently empty because I haven't done anything to actually execute this workflow, but that is the full Supabase setup. So I took a couple of minutes to show that there, because it's really important to make sure you know how to do that. And now we can actually test the step. So let's run it here and boom, there we go. We've got our first 3 items because it took the home page of Pydantic AI and it split it into 3 chunks and inserted each one of them into our knowledge base right here. So I'll click on refresh and there we go. We've got the content for each and then the embeddings as well. So we can do our retrieval lookup with the vector mathematics there. And then we got our metadata. So it also says the page that this is from, which is that little piece of information that I added as well. So that is everything for this workflow. So now what we need to do, I'm going to actually delete these records so we can start fresh here. I'm going to run this workflow so we can ingest everything at once. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to click on test workflow. And there we go. Look, it's already going. So it's making that first request. It's waiting a little bit. And okay, it looks like it was complete. So it did the first task, got all the first 3 chunks in the knowledge base. And now it's going again. All right, boom, there we go. Now it's got 8 in. So if I refresh right here, we should have 8 items in our knowledge base. Look at that, because it processed 2 pages already. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause and come back once it has done everything, because it will take a little bit to get through all 49 pages. All right, the processing is complete. I got a little impatient, so I cut it off at 30 just because I want to get to the last part of my video for you here. But yeah, you can see that it executed this part of the loop 56 times because some of the time it was still processing the request. You can actually click into the if statement to see that. I want to show this for you really quick. So like right here, the status is complete. It looks like it failed for this page. Let me go to another one quickly here. Let's go back to right here. So it's a true branch because the status is complete. It pulled everything successfully. Then on another run, like this one right here, we go to the false branch because the status is still processing. So this shows that not all the time is it going to be after 5 seconds immediately available to us. That's why we have to go in this loop and sometimes ping a second time or a third time after 10 seconds or 15 seconds because we have to wait for that task to be finished. So we have all 148 vectors inserted in our database now. So if I scroll down here, actually you can see right here 148 records that we have in Supabase. And so now we can go on to our agent to actually chat with our knowledge base. I'm not going to go over this one because it's super simple. I just have the chat message receive trigger, and then I have the AI agent node. I don't even have a system message or anything right here, so it's super basic. I've got my Supabase chat history. I've got my GPT-4o mini model, and then I've hooked in the Supabase vector store tool for RAG. So very basic, just using GPT for both my embedding model and my LLM. Now let's open up a chat. Let's actually chat with this. And so I'll ask it a question that it could only answer if it actually has the Pydantic AI documentation in its knowledge base. So I'll say, what are the supported models in Pydantic AI? All right, and so you'll see that it'll start with OpenAI, go to the vector store retrieval tool, process the request, and then send it back to the LLM to give me the final response. And this is absolutely perfect. I mean, you can click into Supabase right here to see the response. These are all the chunks that were returned to us for the LLM to reason about. And yeah, it's got all the models here. This is perfect. And then if I ask another question, like how are tool responses handled? We'll see if it can pull from the tools page this time. So you want to make sure that's actually retrieving from the right pages of the documentation within the knowledge base here. So I'll click into this, scroll down until I get to the URL, and there we go. Yep, it's going to the /tools page right here to get us the answer to our question. Looks good. All right, perfect. This is working absolutely beautifully. And again, this is just very much a proof of concept, but it shows you how you can deploy Crawl for AI with Docker and use it through an API endpoint in N8N. So you don't even have to pip install a package because you can't do that within N8N. So yeah, super neat. Hope that you can take this, extend it to your use cases, and do some awesome things with it. Hello, my name is Salim Al-Bassam. Welcome to this video. Let's get into it. All right, I'm going to jump into N8N in a minute and actually build these alongside you. And one other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sign up to all the services in front of you, walk you through the authentication and the onboarding flows, and get your API keys and stuff like that. But just before I do, I want to explain very quickly the difference between a static site and then a dynamic site. Because if you don't know this, scraping just gets a lot harder. And so we're just going to cover this in like 30 seconds and we can move on. So basically, if this is you, okay, you're just this wonderful, smiley person, and you want to access a static website, what you're doing is you're sending a request over, basically to just like some document. You know, think about this as just like a piece of paper on a cupboard, and there's a bunch of text on this piece of paper. And what you do is you say, hey, can I have this piece of paper? And then the piece of paper just comes back to you with all of the information inside of the piece of paper, okay? This is a very simplified version of what's actually going on, but static sites are by far the easiest thing to scrape. And so this is where, you know, a lot of people think all websites are at. And then they kind of confuse it with this next step, which is dynamic. A dynamic site, essentially, is not like that at all. Basically, what you're doing is you're sending a request to a piece of paper, but the piece of paper has nothing on it, okay? What happens is this piece of paper then sends a request to some other dude, which I guess in this case is just a server relay, who will then, he has a trusty pen in his hand, and he'll actually write all of the stuff on said piece of paper, and then you'll get the piece of paper back. So there's actually that intermediate step, okay? Where basically you are pinging some sort of, domain name or whatever, then that domain name shoots some code over, forces a server to generate all the contents on that domain, and then you get it. This is obviously kind of a two-step process, and then this is a three-step process. So if you just understand that, when you scrape a dynamic resource, what you're really doing is you're sending a request to a page, which sends a request back to another server, which then fills your thing. This eliminates 99% of the confusion. Because most of the time, like scraping issues are, hey, I just pinged this page, but I got nothing back. You know, the HTTP request or whatever I sent, that was fine. But for some weird reason, there's nothing on this page of any substance. Well, if that was the case for you, is most likely because this was empty before you sent it over. Whereas, simple scraped static resources tend to just like give you what you want really quickly, and it's really easy. All right, so hopefully we at least understand that there's that difference between static and dynamic sites here. I'm not going to go into it more than that. We're actually just going to dive in with both feet, start doing a little bit of scraping, and then we'll kind of see where we land. I find the best way to do the stuff is just by example and being practical about it. So the first major way to scrape websites in N8N is using direct HTTP requests. This is also what I like to think of as the magic in scraping itself. What we're going to do is we're going to use a node called the HTTP request node to send a GET request to the website we want. This is going to work with static websites and non-JavaScript resources. So let me give you guys a website that I'm going to be scraping here. This is my own site. It's called LeftClick. I'm about to do a redesign, but this is a static resource. I know this because I built the site. I did it in code, and basically all this is just a document somewhere on a server somewhere. So what I'm going to want to do is, and I'm just going to pretend that I haven't done any of this. So we're just going to go HTTP request. HTTP request node looks like this. We have a method field, a URL field, authentication field, query parameters, headers, body, and then some options down here as well. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste in the website that I want to visit. Okay? Then I'm just going to test the stuff. It's that easy. Now, the response from this on the right-hand side, see all this code over here. This is what's called HTML, if you're unfamiliar. And HTML is basically just it's the code behind the site. So if I were to zoom in over here, you see where it says, let's go to my website. Let's just find a little bit of text here. Build hands-off growth systems. Okay? If I just Command F and paste this in, we actually have that text buried somewhere in this big, long HTML string, right? So all that this HTML is this is the code that is sent to my browser, which is Google Chrome in this case. Then my browser takes the code and it just renders it into this beautiful looking thing. Well, beautiful is a subjective state, I would say, but this wonderful looking thing in front of us, which is this website with the sizing and the tabs and the divs and all that fun stuff, okay? So basically what I'm trying to say is everything over here on the right-hand side, this is the entire site. We can do anything we want with this information. And we can carry this information forward to do any one of many flows. So in my case, right, looking at a bunch of code isn't really very pretty. So One big thing that you'll find in the vast majority of modern scraping applications is you'll find that they'll take that HTML, which we saw earlier, and they'll convert it to something called Markdown. Okay? So this is a Markdown node. We have a mode of HTML to Markdown. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that data, and I'm going to stick it in the HTML section of the HTML Markdown converter. What do you think is going to happen when I test this? Well, we're going to convert this from this big, long, ugly, super dense thing with a bunch of these like greater than and less than symbols. And we're just going to convert it into something a little bit shorter, a little bit simpler. This is us just manipulating file formats, by the way. And I find that manipulating file formats is a big part of what makes a good scraper a good scraper. So now we have something in what's called Markdown format. What's the value there? Well, Markdown format does two things for us. One, it's much easier to parse. Parse just means we can extract different sections of the text we want. We can structure it in some sort of other data format. And then in my case, because I love using AI for everything, it's much easier and shorter for us to use with AI. So I'm going to give you guys a very simple example where we take this text from the static resource, and then we just use AI to tell us something about it. So I'll go down to OpenAI, and then what I'm going to do is I'll do the message A model. Just have to connect my credential here. I'm assuming that you've already connected a credential. If not, you're going to have to go to OpenAI's website when you do the connection and grab your API key and paste it in. There's some instructions that allow you to do so right over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the GPT-4o mini model. That's just the, I want to say most cost-effective one as of the time of this recording. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 prompts. I'm going to add a system prompt first. Also, you are a helpful, intelligent web scraping assistant. Then I'm going to add a user prompt, and I'll say your task is to take the raw markdown of a website and convert it into structured data. Use the following format, and then I'm going to give it an example of what I want in what's called JSON JavaScript object notation format. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have it just pull out all the links on the website, because I find that that's a very common scraping application. So go links, and then I'm just going to show it an example of an array of, we'll go absolute URLs. This is very important that they're absolute URLs. Anything that we're going to build after this is going to be making use of the absolute URLs, not the relative URLs. If you're unfamiliar with what that means, if we zoom way in here, you see how there's this slash left click underscore logo brand.png. This is what's called a relative URL. If you were to copy this and paste this into here, this wouldn't actually do anything for us, right? What we want is we want this. Instead, we want left click, aka the root of the domain, and then left click underscore logo brand, and that's how we get to the actual file asset. So if we go back over here, yeah, you know, basically we want a link array of absolute URLs, and then I'm just going to want plain text website copy. This is going to be a long string containing all of the website copy, containing just the text of the site, no formatting. And then why don't we do one more thing? Why don't we have like a summarized or summary? Let's do one line summary. Just to show you guys, you can also use AI to do other cool stuff. You could take this one line summary and feed it into some big sequence. You could have AI write an icebreaker for an email. You could do a million things with this, but I'll say one line summary, brief summarization of what the site is and how. What the site is about. Let's do that. Okay, so this is our example. I'm going to say your website URL is left click URL for the relative to absolute conversions is left click.ai. And then the final thing is I'm going to add one more user prompt. I'm just going to drag all of that markdown data in here. Then I'm going to click output content as JSON. I'm going to test this step. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee while this puppy processes. And we now have our output on the right-hand side. If we go to schema view, we can see is we've now generated basically an array of links on the right-hand side, which contains every link on this website. Very cool. Looks like the vast majority of these are typeform links for some reason. Don't really know what's about that. Oh, right. It's because that's basically the only thing on my website. It's just a one-pager with a bunch of different links to typeform. That's funny. Anyway, you could obviously just get it to output one link or tell it, like, make sure all the links are unique or something. And then we have a big chunk of plain text website copy, right? And then we have a one-line summary of the site. So this is a very simple example of scraping. We're scraping a static resource, obviously, but when I build scrapers for clients or for my own business, this is always my first pass. I will always just make a basic HTTP request to the resource that I'm looking at. Because if I can make that HTTP request work, whether it's a GET request or whatever, The rest of my life building the scraper is so easy. I just take the data, I process it usually using AI or some very cheap per token thing, and then voila, like we've basically built out a scraper in this case, and it's only taken us what? 3 nodes, right? So that's number one. The second way to scrape websites in end-to-end is using a third-party service called Firecrawl and making an HTTP request to it. I'm using something called their extract endpoint. But just to make a long story short, Firecrawl is a very simple, high bandwidth service that turns websites into large language model ready data. And basically, earlier we had to do a HTTP request and then we had to convert all that stuff into Markdown and then we had to, manipulate that Markdown. What this does is it just does a lot of that stuff for you. It'll actually allow you to go scrape, and then it will automatically convert text into Markdown for you, so that you can do whatever the heck you want. To turn in the structured data using AI and so on and so on and so forth. So if I were to do the same thing that I just did earlier with my own website, then I were to, run an example of this, what it would go do is it would basically spin up a server for me. And they would actually go and generate Markdown of the same format. The only difference here is it's actually generated new lines between sections of text. How beautiful. And then now we know we have basically the same thing. You also get it in JSON, which is pretty cool. And you can slot this into any workflow. This is basically like the simple and easy way of getting started. What we're going to be showing you today is the extract endpoint, which allows you to extract data just using a natural language prompt, which is pretty cool. And from here, we're going to be able to take any URL and just turn it into structured data. But we're not actually going to have to know how to parse. We're not going to have to know any code. We're not going to know any of that stuff. So let me actually run through the sign up process with you guys. Go to firecrawl.dev here. Just going to open this up in an incognito and I'll show you guys what this looks like. All you do, so you just go sign up. I'm going to add a password. But then I'm going to have to validate this one, though, because these guys are mega secure. So now I'm going to go back to my email address. I'm going to count this up. And we have a callback here. I just need to paste this URL and put it in here. That's just because I'm doing this in an incognito tab. Normally when you do this, you're not going to have that step. Okay, great. Now we're inside of Firecrawl. They give you, I think, something like 500 free credits, something of that nature anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just give this extract endpoint just a basic natural language query. So let's go from the home page at leftclick.ai. I want to extract a one-line summary of the website. Let's do all of the text on the website, all of the copy on the website in plain text. Let's do a one-line summary of the website, a one-line icebreaker I can use as the first line of a cold email to the owner, and the company name, and a list of the services they provide. Let's do that. This is a lot of requests. We're asking it to do like 7 or 8 things, but all I need to do in order to make this work is I click generate parameters. It's going to basically now generate me a big object with a bunch of things. So copy, summary, icebreaker, company name. And now I can actually go and I can run this, okay? This is the URL, it's just parsed as well. Let's give it a run. What it's doing now is it's scraping the pages using their high throughput server. I just love this effect. I'm not sponsored by Firecrawl or anything like that, but I love their, and I just love the design. I love this little burning ember or whatever the heck you want to call it. I love how simple they've tried to make everything. It's great, honestly. Okay, awesome. And now you can see we have basically a big array with a bunch of sub-objects. We have a summary, like I asked for, a list of services. Looks like we even have links to the specific places. Oh, okay, links from the resource. We have an icebreaker. We have the company name as well, so we can do a lot with this, right? But right now, this is just on a website. How do I actually bring this in end-to-end? Well, it's pretty simple. As you see, there's an integrate now button. You can either get code or you can use it in Zapier. Basically, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to run a request to their endpoint, and then we're going to want to turn that into basically their HTTP request. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm just going to do all of this stuff in curl. So if we go to curl, so you could see what we need to do is we need to format a request that looks something like this, but we need to make sure it's using the extract endpoint, okay? So I'm going to go down to extract. And then now I have this big, long, beautiful string. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my NANet instance, which is right over here. Now what I need to do is just open up an HTTP request module and then click import curl, just paste all the stuff inside. Now this is an example request, but that's okay. We can actually use that example request to very quickly and easily format our real request. Okay, so we're saying a bunch of headers. This is the endpoint that we're calling api.firecrawl.dev/v1/extract soak. Basically what we're doing now is we're sending a request to Firecrawl, which will then send a request to the website, right? It's kind of a middleman. And then all I'm going to do, so if I go back to my example, we have an API key here, which we're going to need. So I'm going to go here and then paste in an API key. So that's how that works, right? Authorization is going to be the name, value is going to be bear with a capital B space, and then the API key. And then we also have a body that we need to adjust or edit. And this body is where we're going to put the links that we want to actually have scraped with the extract endpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete most of these. I'll go back to my leftclick.ai, just like this. The prompts, because, I was just using their playground before, we're actually going to need to convert this into a request for my service. So I'm just going to paste the prompt in here. Voila. And now we need to put together what's called a schema, where we have the objects that we asked for. So in my case, we asked for copy, right? So I'm going to go copy type string. Then summary. So we're going to go summary type string. Then icebreaker. It's going to be icebreaker type string. And then guess what? We have last but not least company name, which is going to be type string. We're also going to want to make these fields required. Like, you can set it up so that they're not actually required when you do a request to Firecrawl. I'm going to make it so that they're required. So I'll go copy, summary, icebreaker, and then company name. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll leave company name as unrequired. If you think about it logically, maybe not all the websites we're going to be scraping using this service are going to have the company names visible on the website. I don't know, but maybe. So maybe I'll actually leave that as off. Okay, great. So now we have the API request formatted correctly. All we need to do at this point is just click test step. It looks like we're getting a JSON breaking error, and I think that's because I have this last comma. And I'm just going to check to see if there are any other commas. In JSON, you can't actually have the last element in an array have a comma on it. So I think that's okay. I'm testing it. All right, so as you can see, we just received an ID, we've got a success, and then we have a URL trace array, which is empty. If you think about this logically, we don't actually get all the data that we send immediately because we need Firecrawl to whip up the scraper, do things to the data. We could be feeding in 50 URLs here, right? So instead of just having the data available to us right now immediately, what we need to do is we need to basically wait a little while, wait until it's done, and we need to ping it. And the reason why they've given us this ID parameter is so that we could do the pinging. So the way that you do this is you'd have to send a second HTTP request using this structure. So the good news is we could just copy this over. And then we can add a second HTTP request. I don't know where that went, but I guess I'm just going to create it over here. I'm going to import the curl to this request, just like that. And then keep in mind that we just need to add our API key again because the previous node had it, but this one doesn't. So I'm going to go over here and copy this puppy. Go back over here. I'm going to paste this in. Now, technically what this is called is this is called polling. Polling is where, you're attempting to request a resource that you don't know whether or not is ready. And there's a fair amount of logic that I'd recommend, like putting into a polling flow, where like when you try it, and if it doesn't work, basically you wait a certain amount of time and you retry again. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to put all that stuff inside, but what I'm going to do is just set up this request. I'm going to give this puppy a test. Let's just feed that in on the back end. We're going to put the extract ID right over here where it said extract ID. Then I'm just going to give this a test. Looks like I've issued a malformed request. We just have to make sure that everything here is okay. Specify body. Let me just make sure there's nothing else in here. That was a get request. This is a get. Cool. We're not going to send a body then. Awesome. And now we have all the data available to us. Automate your business in the copy field, summary field, left clicks, and add your performance optimization agency. Icebreaker, hi Nick, I came across left click. I'm impressed by you help B2B founders scale their business with automation. Keep in mind, I never gave it my name, but when it found my name on the website. And then company name, left click. So quick and easy way, you're going to have access to this template, obviously without my API key in it. And feel free to, use Firecrawl, go nuts, check out the documentation, build out as complex a scraping flow as need be. The third way to scrape websites in N8N is using Rapid API. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Rapid API is basically a giant marketplace of third-party scrapers, similar to Appify, which we'll cover in a moment. But instead of looking for, building out your own scraper for a resource, let's say you're wanting to scrape Instagram or something that's not a simple static site, what you can do is you could just get a scraper that somebody's already developed that does specifically that, using proxies and all that tough stuff that I tend to abstract away. And then you just request to Rapid API, which automatically handles the API request to the other thing that they want. And then they format it and then send it all back to, and then, you have beautiful data that you could use for basically anything. So this is what Rapid API looks like. It's basically a big marketplace. I just pumped in a search for website over here and we see 2,907 results. To give you guys some context, you can do everything from, scraping social data like emails, phone numbers, and stuff like that from a website. You could ping the Ahrefs SEO API. You could find, like unofficial Medium data that they don't necessarily allow people to do so. This is a quick and easy way to, I guess, do a first pass after you've run through Firecrawl. Maybe that doesn't work. After you've run through HTTP requests, that doesn't work. Just do a first pass. Look for something that scrapes the exact resource you're looking for and then take it from there. So obviously for the purpose of this, I'm just going to use the website scraper API, which is sort of just like a wrapper around what we're doing right now in N8N. But this website scraper API allows you to scrape some more dynamic data. Now I'm not signed up to this, so I'm going to have to go through the sign up process. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. But yeah, we're gonna run through an API request to Rapid API, which is going to make this a lot easier. Just going to put in all of my information here. And then I'm going to do the classic email verification. Okay, just copy this puppy over. No thank you, Rise. I use a time management app called Rise, and every time I go on my Gmail, I set my Gmail up as like a definitely do not do during your workday. Let's just call it personal projects and don't ask me always questions. My goal today is to browse available APIs. Awesome. Since they're onboarding, I think we're gonna have to pay a little bit of money or something like that, which I'll sort out in a moment. But the scraper that I want is I just want the website one, right? So I'm going to type website in here. I'm going to look for wherever it was earlier, website scraper API. And now check this out. What we have is we have the app, which is the name of the specific API that we're requesting. We have an x-rapid API-key, and this is the API key we're going to use to make the request. Then we have the request URL, which is basically what we're pinging. And what we can do here is we could feed in the parameters, okay, what website we want to scrape, and then we can actually just give it a run. So I'm gonna have to subscribe to this in order to test it. I'm just going to go to the basic plan, and I'm going to pay money per month. That probably seems the simplest way to do so. Okay, and I just ran through the payment. Let's actually head over here and let's just run a test using my website URL. We're going to test this endpoint now. And now this is actually going to go through Rapid API. It's going to spin up the server and then it's going to send it. What we see here is we have multiple fields at Rapid APIs, or this particular scraper gives us. Let me just make this easier for you all to see. We have a text content field with all the content of the website, which is cool. This is basically what I did earlier. But instead of me having to formulate this request, try and parse it, and try and use AI tokens, what I did is I just sent the request to Rapid API and it did it all for me. Then we also have an HTML content field. We have one more here. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. As you can see, there's a ton of HTML. And then we also have a list of all of the images on the website, which is very, very cool and easily formatted. Again, something that I tried to do manually using AI. But now, we have everything in that nice absolute URL format. And then if they find any social media links, I don't believe there were more than Twitter, but if they find anything that's at the Twitter, Instagram, whatever, then we have a link right over here. It looks like they even give you the scraping time, and if they scrape emails or phone numbers, they'll be there as well. So, Rapid API is obviously fantastic. This is a high throughput sort of thing. And why don't we actually run through what this would look like if we were to run a curl request? You see how it's automatically just formatting it as curl? Well, that just means we just jump back here, connect this to my HTTP request module, click import curl, paste it in like this, import, and it's actually going to go through and it's going to automatically map all these fields for me, right? Query parameter, URL, left-click.ai, beautiful. API key x-rapid API host. Here's the host. Here's the name of the API key. Or here's everything we need. Well, I can actually just recreate this request now inside of N8N as opposed to be on Rapid API. And then I have all the data accessible to me here. How cool is that? So we can do this for any major website, really. There are a lot of specific bespoke scrapers, obviously, which, I don't know if you wanted to scrape. Let's go back to discovery. If you wanted to scrape like Instagram or something, you could scrape Instagram. You could do like Facebook scraping. You could scrape these large giants that are quite difficult to do, so Meta Ad Library, Facebook Ad Scraper. And depending on the plan that you're at, it might be more cost effective for you to sign up to some sort of monthly recurring thing rather than just pay 2 cents every single time you make one of these requests. You just kind of got to do that determination yourself, right? Like if you're scraping, 50 every day or 100 every day or something, might be $1 or $2 a day, which is reasonable. But maybe if you want to scrape like 5,000, doing it the way that I was doing it a moment ago might be infeasible. The next way to scrape websites in N8N is using the web scraper Chrome extension and then tying that to a cloud service that delivers the data that you just created using their no-code tool in nicely bundled formats. It's called Cloud Sync. As at the time of this recording, I think they changed the name a couple of times, but That's where we're at. Here is the name of the service, web scraper. Here's their website. Essentially what happens is you install a little Chrome plugin, which I'll show you guys how to do. Then you select the fields that you want scraped in various data formats. And then what you do is it handles JavaScript sites, dynamic sites, all that fun stuff. And then you can export that data as a cloud run to then send back, big sneeze, to then send back to some API or some service, and then automatically do parsing and stuff like that. So very cool. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. This is sort of a more customized way to build this stuff, but I've seen a lot of people do this with an end. So we're going to run through what it looks like. So first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to, let's just go cloud login. Start free 7-day trial. As you can see, there's a free browser extension here. If you wanted to do, like high scale stuff, you'd choose probably their project endpoint project plan where we have 5,000 URL credits. We can run a bunch of tasks in parallel. We could scrape dynamic sites, JavaScript sites. We have a bunch of different export options. Then we can also just connect it directly to all of these. What I'm going to do, just because I want this to kind of work as a first go, is I'm just going to sign up to a free trial here. Beautiful. Just created my account. Let's just go left click, give it a phone number, go leftclick.ai. We're going to just go, academic. Records needed per month will go 0 to 1,000. Length of the project, let's go 2 to 3 months. Okay, great. So now we can import and run our own sitemap, or we can use a pre-made community sitemap. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to import this. We're then going to get the Chrome extension web scraper. We add that extension in. It's going to download it, do all that fun stuff. Beautiful. So now we have it right over here. I'm just going to pin it to my browser to make my life easier. Go to leftclick.ai, open up this puppy. There's a bunch of tutorials on how to use this stuff. That's not that big of a deal. But basically the thing you need is you need to hold Command plus Option plus I to open up your developer tools. But you'll just find it on in my case, the far right. So Command, Option I, that'll open up Dev Tools. You see all the way on the right-hand side here, I have a couple other things like Make and Cookie Editor. All the way on the right-hand side here, we have this web scraper thing. So what you're going to want to do first, you're going to want to create a sitemap for the resource that you're going to want to scrape. I'm just going to call it left click. And I just want to scrape left click that app. Okay, once we have our sitemap, if I just give that a quick little click, I can then add a new selector. And the really cool thing about this web scraper is, if I just zoom out a little bit here, what you can do is you can select the elements on the website that you want scraped. So for instance, it's a very quick and easy way to do this. If you think about it, just to show you guys an example, structured data is sort of like an e-commerce application. Let's say you have the title of a product and you have the description of a product. So on my website, really quick and easy way to do this is let's just call this products. And it's a type text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click select. Then I'll just click on this. And I'll click on this as well. And as you see, it'll automatically find all of the headings that I'm looking for. So that's products. We are going to then click data. I'm going to click done selecting. Data preview. As you can see, it only selected one of them, the very first. So what we're going to want to do is go multiple. And now if I data preview, we get all of the headings, which is very cool. So now we have basically like a list of headings. From here, I'm going to save the select. I'm going to add a new one. Let's go product, descriptions, and then going to select this. It'll select all of them. I'll go multiple, data preview just to make sure that it looks good. I'm getting no data extracted here. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually select didn't actually finish it. Now we're getting product descriptions. That's pretty cool. This is me doing this sort of like one at a time. You can also group the selectors that you go. It's actually offered to group it for me. So we can group this into one object with products and the product description. So let's automatically group it. Now we have wrapper for products and product descriptions. Then we have products and product descriptions buried underneath. We could go as far as we want with this, but basically what I'm trying to show you guys is very simple and easy, just to drag your mouse over the specific thing you want. If you select more than one, it'll automatically find all of them on the website, which is really cool. Okay, great. Once we have this, what I can do is I can actually go export sitemap. So now I have all of the code on the website that actually goes and finds it for me. Then I can paste this in here. I'll just call this left click scraper. Then I'm going to import this to my cloud scraper. I think I'm running into, I'm sorry, I don't think we can do a space there. My bad. Just call it left click. And now what we can do is we can actually just run a server instance that goes out and then scrapes this for us. Okay. So I'm going to click scrape. Looks like I need to verify my email. So just make sure you do that before you try and get ahead of yourself like I was. Okay, looks like we just verified the email. Let's head back over here, refresh, then scrape. we've now scheduled a scraping job for the sitemap. Scheduling, in their lingo just means that it's now part of their big long queue of thousands of other things that they're probably scraping through this server, and that's fine. Okay, I just gave this a refresh, and as we see, we have now finished said scraping job. We have all of the data available to us using their UI. But now that we've gone through this process of, building out this thing, how do we actually take that and then use it in our N8N flows? So a variety of ways. If you wanted to connect this, let's say, to specific service like Dropbox, Google Sheets, dump an eRow or something Google Drive, I'd recommend just doing it directly through their integration. It's just a lot easier to get the data there, and then you can just connect it to N8N and watch the data as it comes in or something. You can also use the web scraper API. This is pretty neat because you can, it's what we're going to end up using. That's pretty neat because you can schedule jobs, you can send jobs, you can do basically everything just through the N8N interface. And then we can just retrieve the data afterwards, just pretty neat. And this is basically what you end up getting. You end up with scraping job ID, status, sitemap, all this fun stuff. And then we can set like a webhook URL where we receive the request. So let me check. We need a scraping, for testing, you need a scraping job that has already been finished. I think our scraping job has already been finished. I'm just going to go HTTPS back to my N8N flow. I'm actually going to build an N8N webhook that a click. Not going to have any authentication. We just turn all this off. Basically what we want is we want to use this as our test event. We're going to go back to the API, paste this in, save, and I'm just going to want to give it a test endpoint here. So test. Looks like the push notification was failed. The reason why is because it's saying this webhook is not registered for post request. Did you mean to make it get request? Beautiful. Thank you, N8N. We absolutely did. So I'm going to stop listening, change the HTTP method here to post. There's basically two ways to call a website, and this is one of them. It'll listen for test events, go back here, and then a retest. Awesome. Looks like we've now triggered the beginning of our workflow using this data. Let's see what sort of information was in it. Okay, great. We have the scraping job ID, the status, execution mode. Okay, great. So we basically have everything we need now to set up a flow where we can schedule something in this web scraper service that maybe monitors some, list of e-commerce products or something every 12 hours. And then we can set up a webhook in N8N that will catch the notification, get the update. And what we can do is we can ping the web scraping API, which I'll show you how to set up in a second, to request the data from that particular scraping run. And from here, we can take that data, do whatever the heck we want with it. But obviously, let me show you an example of what the actual data looks like. So we just got the data from webhook. Let's set up an HTTP request to their API now, or we basically get the ID of the thing, and then we can call that back. So got my API token over here. I'm gonna head over to their API documentation first, okay? And then what we want to do is download these scraped data in CSV format. At least in my case, I imagine most of you guys are gonna add this to a spreadsheet or whatever. You can very easily do whatever you want. There's also a JSON format endpoint here, but let's just do CSV for simplicity. So I've already gone ahead and I've gotten the method, which was a GET request. So I've added that up here. The URL was this over here with the scraping job ID and then your API token there. So what I've done is I've grabbed the API token and the scraping job ID. I hard-coded it in here just while I was doing the testing. Let's actually make this dynamic now. Drag the scraping job ID right over here, voila. And then the API token. If you guys remember back here on the API page, you have your access to your API token. So just copy that over. Great, and now if I run this, I'm actually selecting that specific job. But from here, we have all of the data that we just scraped. As you can see, there's like the way that CSV works. Actually, let me just copy this over here. I just wanted to give this to you guys as an example of a different data type, but maybe some people here aren't really familiar with it. Basically, the way that it works is if I just paste this into like a Google Sheet, you see how it looks like this? What you can do is if you just split the text to columns, kind of see how there's like these 4 headings. There's web scraper order, web scraper startup, products, and then product descriptions, right? Imagine scraping this for some lead gen some e-commerce application. List of products here, product descriptions, maybe product prices, maybe product whatever the heck you want. So yeah, you can output in like a number of formats, and I just wanted to give you guys an example of what that looks like. The next way to scrape websites in N8N is using Appify. If you guys are no strangers to this channel, you know that I do Appify all the time, and I talk about them all the time because I think that they're just a great service. They've now given me a 30% discount where anybody can use it for, I was initially under the impression it was lifetime. I think it's 3 months. So you probably get 30% off your first 3 months. Just check the description if you want that. But such how Appify is it is a marketplace very similar to Rapid API, although extraordinarily well maintained. And they also have a ton of guides set up to help you get, up and running with scraping any sort of application. So just as we had earlier, we have Instagram scrapers, we have TikTok scrapers, we have email scrapers, we have map scrapers, Google Maps. We could do Twitter scrapers, Medium scrapers, right? Basically any service out there that has this dynamic aspect to it that's not a simple HTTP request you can make. You could scrape it using Apify. And then obviously you have things too, like just basic website crawlers. You could generate screenshots of sites. I mean, there's so many things. So let me walk you guys through what it looks like. Now, in my case, I'm not actually going to sign up to Apify because I have like 400 accounts. But trust me when I say it is a very easy and simple process. You go to apify.com. You go get started. You put in your email and your password. They'll give you $5 in free platform credit. You don't need any credit card, and you can just get up and running and start using this for yourself super easily. And the second that you have all that, you'll be greeted with this screen. It is a console screen. Don't be concerned when you see this. This is super simple and easy and not a big deal. This is one of my free accounts. So I just wanted to show you guys what you can do with a free account. But from here, what you do is you go to the store, and as you can see, I'm just dark mode. All this is the same thing we were just looking at before. And then we're just going to run a test on the thing that we want to scrape, okay? So what I'm going to want to do is, for the purposes of this, I'm now going to do something different from what I was doing before, like which is just left click over and over and over again. I think that kind of gets boring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape Instagram posts, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed in a name, Nick_Soraya. This is just my Instagram, which almost hit 10K in, God, like 15 days, something like that. But I'm going to feed in my Instagram here. And then I'm just going to grab like the last 10 posts, okay? Save and start. This is now going to run an actor. Actor is just their term for scraper. Which will go out, it'll extract data from my Nick_Soraya Instagram. And as you can see, we'll get a ton of fields. Caption, owner, full name, owner, Instagram, URL, comments count, first comment, likes count, timestamp, query tag. We get everything from these guys, which is really cool. This might take, 30, 40, 50 seconds. We are spinning up a server in real time every time you do this. As you see in bottom left-hand corner, there's a little memory tab, which shows that we are legitimately running a server with 1 GB of memory right now. So generally, my recommendation when you use Apify is not to use it for one-off requests like this. Feed in 5 to 10, 15, 20 Instagram pages. But I just got the data back, and voila, we have it. It's right in front of us. We have all of the data of that person's Instagram profile. So you can see it's quite scalable in that way. So the question is obviously, how do you get this in NNN? Well, Apify has a really easy to use API, which I like doing. All you have is, we wanted to get the, get data set items, okay? All I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, go back here, and then connect this to an HTTP request module. As you can see, we have this big long field here with my API, Apify API token, and the specific data set that I'm looking for. I'll show you how to get it dynamically, but I just wanted to allow you to see how to get data in N8N really quickly. Now if we go to the schema view, we can see we legitimately, we already have all of the data that we had from Apify a second ago, okay? Super easy and quick and simple to get up and running. We have the input URL field, the ID field, the type, the short code, caption. Now, this is Instagram. Looks like we have some comments. I don't have any style. How do I create, my man? You just gotta fake it till you make it. I don't have any style either. Just some nerd in my mom's basement. Yeah, so you can scrape any resource you want here. Obviously I was scraping an Instagram resource, but like if you're scraping something else, there'd be no change to this all. No change whatsoever. Now, basically what we need in order to make this dynamic, basically make us able to run something in Apify and then get it in N8N. So we need to set up an integration. So just head over to this tab, set up integration, and then all you want to do is you just want to do webhook. Send an HTTP post webhook when a specific actor event happens. The actor event that we're going to want is basically when the run is succeeded. The URL we're going to want to send this to make about it, let me just actually make another webhook request here. Webhook. The URL we're going to want to send it to is going to be this test URL over here. I'm just going to delete all the header auth stuff here because it just complicates it, especially for beginners. But we're going to copy this over, head back over here, paste in this URL, and then let me see. This is a post request, I think. I don't actually remember, so we're going to have to double check. I think it's a post request. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen for a test event, run the test webhook. So we're making a GET request. Okay, so the fact that it hasn't connected yet probably tells me it's a post request. So let's move over here, move this down to post. Now let's listen to a test event. Let's run this puppy one more time. So we just dispatched it, and yeah, the post request succeeded. And what did we get? We got tons of information. We got a body with the user ID, created ad event data, joke. Right, looks like when you test something out, they just send you a joke about a Chuck Norris and skeletize a cow in 2 minutes. Have you ever heard of the word skeletize before this moment? I haven't. I want to be known for my ability to skeletize. We'll go Instagram, website, scraper. Okay, and now if we go back here, right, we're now listening for a test event. So I'm going to listen for this test event. I'm going to run the same scraper again. Maybe we'll make it 5 posts per profile just to make it a little faster. And once this is done, what it's going to do is it's going to send a record of all the information we need to get the data over to Canadian. We're going to catch that information, and then we're going to use it to query the database basically that it created for that particular Instagram run, which will then enable us to do whatever the heck we want with it. So it's now starting to crawl. As we see here, we had 5 requests, so it should be able to do this in like the next 5 seconds or so. Okay, and once that's done, we now have an actor succeeded event. And then we have, let me see. The data that we want would be the default dataset ID down over here. So if we just go to that next HTTP request node, what I can do is I can feed that in as a variable right here. It's going to default dataset ID. Drag that in between these 2 little lines. And now we can test that step with actual live data. Now we have everything that we need. So, I don't know, maybe now you want to feed this into AI and you want to have AI tell you something about the last 5 posts. Tell you, wow, those last 5 posts were amazing, Nick. I loved specifically the one on Korea. And I just wanted to send you over some quick assets to help you out, right? You can now do super dynamic and structured outreach. You could take that data and use it to like draft up your own post. I mean, the options are ultimately unlimited. That's why I love Appify so much. The 6th way to scrape websites with N8N is data for SEO. This is another third-party service, but it's a very high-quality one that's specifically geared towards search engine optimization requests. You guys haven't seen data for SEO before. It's basically this big API stack that allows you to do things like automatically query a service, maybe some e-commerce website or some content website, and then like extract things in nicely structured formatting. Again, specifically for SEO purposes. Tons of APIs here as well. I mean, a lot of these services are now going towards like more marketplace style stuff, but just to give you guys an example, you could call like Google really quickly to scrape a big list of Google search results for a term, and then you could like feed that into one of any of the other scrapers that we set up here to get data on stuff. You'd go Google Images, Google Maps, you could do Bing, Baidu, YouTube, Google's their own dataset feature. I don't really know what that is, but I imagine it's pretty cool. And then you can even take this data and do really fun stuff with it. So I'm just going to click try for free over here in the top right hand corner, show you guys what that looks like. And as you see here, I signed in to Data for SEO to my own account. Looks like I have 38 million bajillion dollars. Ha ha ha. But obviously you'd have to go through the rigmarole of creating our account. So why don't I actually just do that with you, and then we'll just use that account that has 38 million bajillion dollars. We'll click try for free. We'll go Nikki Wiki. Let's use a different email. Do I need a business email, huh? That's unfortunate. Okay, I do agree to the terms of use. Absolutely. Bicycle? Is that a bicycle? That's not a bicycle. What does it mean when I can't answer these? Does it mean that I'm a robot? If you look at some of my posts, some of my comments, people would absolutely say, yes, it means that you're a robot. I don't know why people keep saying stuff like, dude, Nick, nice AI avatar, bro. But it's not an AI avatar. It's not an AI avatar at all. It's actually just me. Okay, anyway, so I need to activate my account. It doesn't look like it allows you to feed in the code here, so I'm just going to feed it in myself. It's obviously getting a lot of spammers, hence this bicycle stuff. I don't know why the code isn't working here. Let me just copy this link address, paste it in here instead. There you go. Okay, great. So now you can sign in. And once you're in, you got also, they're actually really big on bicycles. They're training a model to convert all atoms on planet Earth into bicycles. They'll actually give you $1 worth of API access credits, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go over to mine, which is 38 million bajillion dollars with 9,999 estimated days to go. And yeah, let's actually run through this. The first thing that I recommend you do is go over to Playground on the left-hand side. There's all of their different API endpoints that you can call. What I'm going to do is I'll just go to SERP for now, just to show you that you could scrape Google with this pretty easily. So maybe I'm in the UK and I want to scrape. Let me see. a keyword, nix arrive, okay? Then I'm going to send a request to this API. There's a bunch of other terms here that are going to make more sense if you're an SEO person. But now we receive as output a structured object with a ton of stuff, right? We have the first result here. It's like an organic one with, it's a big URL, a bunch of chips. I have like a knowledge grab profile, which is cool. Apparently it says I'm a freelance writer. We have a bunch of data here, a bunch of data. You can use this to get URLs of specific things. And then with the URLs, you can then feed that into scrapers that do more, like I talked about earlier, maybe Apify or maybe Wrap API, maybe Firecrawl. So a lot of options here to like create your own very complex flows. You can do other stuff as well. You can grab a bunch of keyword data. So maybe you wanted to find a keyword. Maybe again, it's Nixaraf. Location you want, let's do United States, it'll probably be better. Language, I'm just not going to select the language and then I'll do a request. So now it's going to find us a bunch of search volume related stuff. So I don't actually know how many people are searching for me. In 2025, apparently 390. Is this per month? Whatever it's per month, per day. That's interesting. I don't really know why they break it down by like the month date. Yeah, looks like it's 390 per month. So to the 390 people that are Googling me, who are you and what do you want? Just kidding. You can do things like you could find backlinks. So you could find links for, I believe you feed in a website URL and then it finds backlinks to that website. So this is you technically now scraping a bunch of other websites looking for links to the specific resource that you have. That's kind of neat. Looks like that found it basically immediately, which is really, really cool. Now it looks like they're referring top level links that are .coms, .bgs. .bgs would be interesting. I wonder where that's coming from. There's a content generation API playground, so you could, feed in some text and then have it generate other stuff. But I think we're kind of getting away from the actual thing that matters, which is the scraping of the websites. So yeah, lots of stuff for sure. That's all good. But let's actually turn this into an API call. If we head over to the API of data for SEO, so in my case, docs.dataforseo.com/v3/on_page/content_parsing/live. That's what I'm curious about. You'll see that we have a post request that we can just into this URL. And well, I have a curl just like this, which I can feed into an API request. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm just going to import this curl. Import. And it's going to go through and it's basically going to parse out all these fields that I'm interested in with the URL, which I'll go HTTPS, left-click.ai. And then we have sort of like a gotcha here that a lot of people don't understand. This is the authorization. The authorization is a little bit different from most of the easy authorizations we've had so far. We actually have to convert it. We have to go one more step basically to make this work. If I check out the, let's see, authorization here, what we need is we need to get the login and then the so this is your username and then your password. Then we have to hash it, or not hash it, but we have to convert it into something called base64. And this is just how they do their API key stuff, I guess. It's kind of annoying, but it's just part and parcel of working with some APIs. You're just not always going to have it available to you really easily. So I'm just going to go back to data for SEO. And then I'm going to grab my credentials. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to base64 encode the username and the password. I'm just going to leave that out. What I've done is I've actually gone through and done it in this edit fields node. Basically what you need to do is you need to have your nick at leftclick.ai. So that might be my username. And then my password is what's called the API password. You can find that really quickly and easily just by going over here to API access and then API password. If you just signed up, it'll be visible right here. If it's more than 24 hours, you actually have to send it by email. But anyway, so that's where I get the API password from. And then once you feed it in over here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to base64 encode it like this. They just require you to use these creds, or to operate with these creds as base64 encoded versions. Base64 is just a way to like translate into a slightly different number format. So once you have that, you would just feed in the variable right over here, just as follows, and then you can make a request to their API and receive data. So it looks like I was doing their content parsing live. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to call their other endpoint, which I think was their like instant pages. This one right up here starts with V3. Once you've sorted this out, by the way, the eBay gets like extraordinarily easy to manage. You just need to like figure out the authentication. From there on out, all you're literally doing is just swapping out the requests. So, if you want to do instant pages, all I'm doing is pumping that in there. I just sent a request and now I receive a bunch of links with different headings and so on and so forth. That's easy. The seventh way to scrape websites in end-to-end is using a third-party application called Crawlbase. They're known for their rotating proxies, which allow you to send very high volume API requests. So it's very proxy driven. This is their website. So it's a scraping platform similar to Rapid API. Appify, they support many of the major websites here. And the reason why they're so good at this is just because they, as I mentioned, they rotate the hell out of these proxies. So we're just going to sign up to try it free. I'll use my business email here. And then continue with email. We got to add a phone number, obviously. We're going to do less than 1,000. I'm a CTO. I don't want to. What's the animal? Right? Is that an animal? Yes, it's an animal. Good God. Beep boop. We're going to head over to my Gmail and receive this now. So I need to confirm my account. I'm just going to copy this link address so that I can do this in one page. Awesome. We should be good to log in. So that's what's happening. We need to select the animal again. It doesn't believe. Really just doesn't believe. Okay, great. So now we have a crawling API smart proxy thing. If you guys want to run like, I don't know, use in apps that have a proxy field specifically. I'm just going to keep things simple. We're doing this in N8N. So we're going to go Crawlbase API. We have 1,000 free crawls remaining. Very first thing we're going to want to do is just click Start Crawling Now. Just get up and running with the API. And as you see here, these guys have probably one of the simplest APIs possible. All API URLs start with the following base part. Click, and then all you need to do in order to make an API call is run the following sort of line. So this is a curl request. Obviously, we're in N8N, and one of the valuable parts of N8N is we can just import a curl request. So while I'm going to import it, as you can see here, we have a token field, and we just have the URL field of the place we want to crawl. So I'm going to do leftclick.ai for now. I don't know if this token field was actually my real token. I don't believe so. Maybe we'll give it a try. Maybe it's like a test token or something. So now running this, and it looks like we just received a bunch of very spooky data. I don't like the spooky data. No spooky data for us. Sometimes spooky data like this. It seems kind of weird to me, actually. Just give me 1 second to make sure that's right. We are receiving a data parameter back, which is nice, but yeah, something about this is a little bit spooky. Was it a GET request or was it a POST request? No, I guess it's a GET request. It's strange. Very, very strange. Okay, anyway, they give you two types of tokens here. This is why I'm talking about it to begin with. Also because I've just used it before for a couple of applications and I found it pretty easy. They give you a normal token and then they give you a JavaScript token as well. So the reason why that's valuable is because if you're scraping one of these websites I talked about before, where when you send a simple HTTP request, something pops up. Really, like this is the purpose of this. You actually feed in a JavaScript token. When you use a JavaScript token, it'll automatically launch a browser instance inside of Crawlbase for you. So instead of you getting just like that empty thing back that I mentioned, you're actually going to get you can get like a JavaScript version of the website where somebody went on the website, it loaded really briefly, and then they grabbed the code afterwards. So yeah, we have some API call stuff over here. This one's just using Amazon. This is pretty interesting. So I might actually give that a go, just to give you guys an example of said Amazon scrape. I'll just go to www.amazon.com. Oh, right, Amazon might be JavaScript actually, so maybe give that a go. Now, it looks like we got the data for Amazon, which is pretty cool. If you feed that into the markdown converter like we had before, it's going to feed in the HTML here, pump it into a data key. We've now converted this into, this is very long, let's go to tabular. We've now converted this into markdown, which is cool, and it's pretty long, right? Obviously has all of the images and has all of the information on the site, which is cool. Then we can feed it into OpenAI like I did before, where I message a model. And I'm just going to copy from my previous application here to make my life a little bit easier. Where the heck are you? And then we're just going to feed in the code here. And then, because I didn't feed in this. We should now run this. We're going to grab the data from the site and we're going to try and, I mean, you know, we kind of all know what Amazon is and what it does, right? So I'm not expecting anything spectacular, but it's still going to go. It's going to give me all of the text on this Amazon page, and then I'm going to get a bunch of list of links, basically. Absolute URLs, ideally. Should play some Jeopardy music. Dun 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 dun. Or maybe I'll play Star Wars music. That'd be kind of cool. Okay, we now have schema with all the links on the page, which is pretty cool. We have the plain text website copy. We have one-line summary. Yeah, plain text website copy is a lot longer than this. Obviously, it's just shortening and truncating it for us. But yeah, very quick and easy way to use Crawlbase for this. Now, the value in Crawlbase is not necessarily just to send them to static websites like I talked about. It's to use like highly scalable scraping, where you're scraping many applications consistently. As you see here, the average API response time is between 4 to 10 seconds, so you will receive results back pretty quick. If you wanted to just send one request or 20 requests every second, think about it. Like 20 requests a second times 60 seconds a minute is 1,200 requests times 60 minutes an hour is 72,000 requests, right? Sorry, just jumping around the place here. You could send 72,000 requests basically an hour, which is crazy. And you can do so as quickly and as easily as just like adding an API call like this. And then it'll automatically distinguish between like a plain text thing or a JavaScript thing. Okay, the 8th way to scrape data in N8N, specifically website resources, is Octoparse. Octoparse is very similar to some of the other services that we've talked about. It is a web scraping tool that actually gives you quote-unquote free web crawlers. And I'm just a fan of their UX. I think it's very clean. I think the way that they have their sign-up flow and stuff's really easy. So if you made it to this part of the tutorial and you have yet to sign up to one of these services, give Octoparse your thoughts. Let's double check that I haven't actually created an account using this. No, I haven't. Fantastic. So I should be able to jump through and show you guys what this looks like. We have a verification code I'm going to paste in. If you're not familiar with jumping around and stuff like this, or if you're wondering how I'm jumping around, I'm just using a bunch of website hotkeys. Okay, great. Account is now ready, so we could start a free premium trial if you want to. I think you're gonna have to add a card. I don't know if I have enough credits to actually do anything, but if I'm not, then I'll start that trial in a second. What you're gonna have to do in order to make this work is you're gonna want to download the Octoparse desktop app. So let's give it a quick and easy go. Just gonna drag this puppy. If you are using something that is not macOS, you will not have this strange drag and drop feature here. Once that is done, you will have Octoparse accessible. Just open that up. Yes, I want to open this. Thank you. And the cool thing about Octoparse, kind of relative to what else, you know, like the other scraping applications I talked about, is this is just running in a desktop app, like kind of in your computer. So, like, it's cool because it's just easy to get up and running with, and it's also local, as opposed to a lot of these other ones, which are not. So I'm going to auto log in on my desktop app, remember my password, beautiful. The simplest and easiest way to scrape a service is just to pump in the URL here, then click start. Basically what will happen is it'll actually launch like an instance of your browser here with this little tool that allow you, similarly to the web scraping Chrome extension, select the elements on the page you want scraped. So I don't know, maybe I want these logos scraped. The second that I tapped one, you'll see it automatically found 6 similar elements. So now I'm actually like scraping all of this stuff. Okay, now we have access to this sort of drag and drop or selector thing, similar to what we had before. So you click on one of these, you'll see it allow you to select all similar elements, which is pretty sweet. And then you can also do things like click elements and so on and so forth. Extract the text data here. And you can also tie that to other things, right? So as you see, I'm now mapping each of these very similarly to how I was doing before, between the first field, which is the title of the product, and then the second field, which is like the field 2. So that's pretty sweet. We could do the same thing with a number of things. You could extract like the headings and then the values and so on and so on and so forth, but I'll kind of leave it there. So once you're done selecting all the elements that you want, all you do is you click run, and you have a choice between running it on your device versus running it on the cloud. So on the cloud is API supported. That's how you're going to get stuff in N8N. But I just want you guys to know that you can also just run it here. You could run it here, load up the URL, scrape all the things that you want on the specific page you're feeding it, and then you can be done with it. So I just selected run in the cloud. It's now going to open up said cloud instances. As we could see, we have this little field where it's running and extracting the data. We're now done, so I can export this data locally. But I could also do a lot of other stuff, which we'll try in a second. So you can dump this automatically to Google Sheets. You could do Zapier to connect to Google Sheets, do like some sort of webhook connection, export to cloud storage, similar stuff to the web scraping Chrome extension. But for now, let's just export this as JSON. Give ourselves a JSON file here. Thank you. And yeah, now we have it locally. Now, in order to connect with the Octoparse API, what you're going to have to do is first you have to request an access token. The way that you do this is you send a post request to this URL here. And the way that you format it is you need to send your username, your password, and then have the grant underscore type as password, okay? Now, password, obviously, just put in whatever your password is. No stored in plain text like I'm doing. With my hypothetical password, put it somewhere else and then grab that data and then use it. But the output of this is we have this big long access token variable, which is great. After that, if I just go back to their API here, once we're here, we can actually extract the data that we need. So basically, the thing that you're going to want is you're going to want get data by offset. You also use get non-exported data, which is interesting. So I think this just like dumps all of the data as not exported and then sends that over to you, I believe. But anyway, you can also get the data by offset. So if I go get request to open-API to octoparse.com/all, and then I just send a header with the URL parameter. This is a get request. We're going to send a header with the token, so authorization bearer, and then feed in the access token here. Just make sure that this is just one space. No, it's two. But feed this in. It's saying that it's a bad request. Let me just triple check why. I think we need 3 fields. Yeah, I think we need 3 fields, actually. My bad. We need this get request. And then we need the authorization header, like I talked about. Then we need 3 fields. Task ID. Yeah, right. Obviously, we need to feed in the task ID. So you need task ID, offset, or size. So we'll feed this in as query parameters here. So send query parameters. The first value was task ID. Second one was offset. Offset is no capital. The third was size. Offset's going to be 0. Size is going to be, I don't know, let's just do 1000. And what we need now is we need the task ID of the specific run that we just finished. Oh, in order to get the task list, you head over to task list. Top right-hand corner here, task ID API. So we have access to this. So if we go back to our N8N instance, we could feed that in here. If I test the stat, you'll see that we now have all the data that we just asked for earlier. So a variety of ways to do this in practice. Like Octoparse allows you to schedule runs. You could schedule them using their, whatever it is, like cloud service. You could use it to scrape, I don't know, Twitter. They have a variety of like other scrapers that you can check out just heading over to this new here. If we just go down to templates, there's a variety of other ways to scrape. Google Job Scraper, Glassdoor Scraper, Super Pages Scraper. You could schedule these, right? And the way you can do in N8N is you could just query it once a day. Grab all the data, like I showed you how to do a moment ago. Dump that into some sheet. Octoparse is pretty cool. It's like more like an industrial enterprise level application. To be honest, though, there might be some gotchas if you're not super familiar with working with like desktop apps and stuff, but I like the idea that you can also just scrape locally, which is pretty sweet. And the last of our 9 best ways to scrape websites in N8N is browserless. Now, browserless runs a headless Chrome instance in the cloud. This stuff is great for dynamic or heavy JavaScript websites. If you've never used browserless before, the cool part about browserless is it allows you to actually bypass captchas, which is a big issue that a lot of people have. So I'm going to click try it for free. I'm going to enter my email address over here, verify. I need to submit a code, so let's head back over here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a ton of free trial signups, obviously. I don't have a promo code or anything. I don't have a company name. I'm just going to enter a password. I'm using this to get past, to avoid setting up a Puppeteer and Playwright server, sure. I'm going to click complete. We're now going to have 1,000 credits inside of browserless, which is pretty sweet. And we'll get a full plan eventually. We now have an API token, so I can figure out how all the stuff works. I'm just going to dive right into the API. I can figure out how all the API stuff works using their API docs, which are fantastic, by the way. And we don't want to do any of this stuff. We just want to do HTTP API as browserless API index. Okay, great. So here's where we're at. If you want to send and receive a request, what you need to do is you send a request to one of these endpoints. Content, unblock, download, function, PDF, screenshot, scrape, or performance. What we want for the purpose of this is just, let's do content, okay? This is the request right over here. So I'm just going to paste my API token up here, copy this request, feed it into n8n in the HTTP request module, as per usual. Nice, quick, and easy. I'm going to grab my API token, where it says your API token here. I'm going to feed that in. What I want as a website is just left-click.ai. I'm going to run test step. We are now querying the API, and in seconds, we have access to the data. Same thing that we had before, but now we're using a pass-through, and Browserless is a great pass-through because, you know, they allow you to scrape things that go far beyond the usual static site thing. So, like, honestly, and I'm just leaving this as a secret and sort of a little, I guess, Easter egg for people that have made it this far in the video. Like, my go-to when scraping websites is, as I mentioned, do that HTTP request, try and forget that works. Then do something like firecall.dev. But if that doesn't work, I do something like Browserless that has all of the stuff built in. And I especially use Browserless anytime that there's some sort of, you know, application where, I'm just going to save this so I can make all my HTTP requests really easy. Especially when, you know, there's issues with captchas and accessing resources and stuff. Check this out. Not only can you do the actual scrape, you can do a screenshot of the page as well. Because I've entered my token up here, the requests that I'm going to be setting up are as simple as importing the curl, then clicking test step. So straightforward. We now have a file, which is the screenshot. Now I used example domain there. Let's go left-click.ai. Run this test. Now you can see we've actually received a screenshot of the website. View. Very sexy. My website's pretty long, so keep in mind. And yeah, you know, obviously a lot you could do with that. You could download the site. You could turn the site into a PDF. So that's pretty neat. I don't think I've actually used this one before, but for the purposes of this demonstration, why don't we give it a try? We'll go over here, import the curl, paste it in. Voila. The website I'm going to do is left-click.ai. Going to test this step. So now the server's doing a couple things, like scraping the site, then converting it all into PDF format, probably screenshotting a bunch of stuff too if I view this now. We now have my file. Looks like it didn't capture all of the color aspects. That might just be difficult or whatever, but I still have like a PDF of the site, which is pretty neat. And yeah, I'll let you guys kind of screw around with this on your own, but there are a variety of cool applications you can use Browserless for. Alright, I hope you guys appreciated the 9 best ways to scrape websites in n8n. As you guys could see, it's a combination of platform scraping using the HTTP request module, a lot of like API documentation, stuff like that. If you want to get good at this, I'm releasing a masterclass on API stuff as part of my next n8n tutorial video. And then, you know, navigating this and then taking the data from these services and using them to do something that you want to do, like artificial intelligence to give you a summary of the site or generate icebreakers for you or do something else. Whether you're using a local application like Octoparse or maybe the web scraping Chrome extension, or using something like Firecrawl, Browserless, Appify, Rapid API, and so on and so forth.